Daddy, she looks like Mommy. The whispered words from a 5-year-old girl would shatter one man's carefully guarded heart and save a woman abandoned in the snow. When Clara Hawthorne stepped off that train in her wedding dress, she expected to meet her groom. Instead, she found betrayal, frozen tears, and an empty platform in 1883 Montana. But fate wasn't finished with her yet. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Clara's journey travels across the world. The train's whistle cut through the Montana wilderness like a knife through silk, sharp, final, and utterly unforgiving. Clara Hawthorne pressed her gloved hand against the frost-covered window, watching the endless white landscape blur past. Her breath fogged the glass, obscuring her view for just a moment before she wiped it clear again. She needed to see. Needed to catch that first glimpse of the town that would become her home. The town where Levi Ransom was waiting for her. At least that's what she told herself. The wedding dress she wore, every stitch sewn by her own hands over 6 months of patient, hopeful work, rustled softly with each movement. White lace collar, pearl buttons down the bodice. Sleeves that fell just past her wrists in the modest fashion befitting a mail-order bride. She'd embroidered tiny flowers along the hem, working by candlelight in her boarding house room in Philadelphia, imagining the moment Levi would see her for the first time. Would his eyes light up? Would he smile that warm smile she'd imagined from his letters? My dearest Clara, his last letter had begun. I count the days until you arrive. The ranch is prepared. The preacher is arranged. All that's missing is you. That letter sat now in her small carpet bag, along with everything else she owned in this world. 3 dresses, a hairbrush, her mother's Bible, and the embroidered handkerchief she'd made for Levi as a wedding gift. His initials intertwined with hers. L and C, forever joined in blue thread. The train lurched, and Clara steadied herself against the wooden seat. Around her, the other passengers were gathering their belongings. A merchant with a case of samples. A family heading west for a new start. A grizzled prospector who'd slept the entire journey, his hat pulled low over his eyes. None of them paid her any attention, and she was grateful for that. Her stomach churned with nerves that had nothing to do with the train's movement. What if he didn't like her? What if she wasn't what he expected? They'd exchanged photographs, yes. Hers taken by a street photographer in Philadelphia. His sent in a stiff envelope with a Montana postmark. She'd studied that photograph until she'd memorized every detail. Strong jaw, dark hair, eyes that seemed kind, even captured in faded sepia. But photographs could lie. Letters certainly could. Still, his letters had been kind, thoughtful. He'd written about his ranch, about the mountains, about the life they would build together. He'd lost his parents to illness 3 years prior and had been running the ranch alone since then. I'm not a wealthy man, he'd written honestly, but I'm a hard worker, and I promise to provide for you and treat you with respect and care. I believe we could be happy together, Clara. I believe we could build something good. That promise, that simple, honest promise, had been enough. Enough to leave behind the only city she'd ever known. Enough to board a train heading into the frozen unknown. Enough to wear a wedding dress made for a man she'd never met. The train began to slow. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs as she gathered her carpet bag and stood on shaking legs. Through the window, she could see the small town emerging from the snow-covered landscape. Wood-frame buildings, a church steeple, a main street that looked like it couldn't have been more than 3 blocks long. This was Silver Ridge, Montana. Population 247, according to Levi's letter. Her new home. The train shuddered to a stop with a screech of brakes and a final blast of steam. The conductor called out, "Silver Ridge, 20-minute stop!" and passengers began filing toward the exit. Clara waited, letting the others go first. Her hands trembled as she smoothed down her dress one last time. This was it, the moment she'd been traveling toward for 3 weeks. 3 weeks on trains, changing lines, moving ever westward until the cities gave way to towns, and the towns gave way to this. Wilderness punctuated by small settlements of stubborn humanity. She stepped down onto the platform, and the cold hit her like a physical blow. Philadelphia had been cold, but this was something else entirely. The wind cut through her dress as if the fabric didn't exist. She gasped, clutching her carpet bag tighter, and looked around. The platform was nearly empty. The family that had been on the train was already being greeted by relatives. The merchant headed toward town with his sample case. The prospector wandered off without a backward glance. But there was no Levi. Clara stood there, scanning every face, looking for the man from the photograph. Her breath came out in visible puffs of white. Snowflakes had begun to fall, light and dancing, settling on her dress like tiny frozen stars. She turned in a slow circle, searching. "Excuse me, miss?" She whirled around. A man approached, elderly, with a thick gray beard and kind eyes beneath a fur-lined hat. He tipped that hat to her politely. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked. "Yes," Clara said quickly, hope surging in her chest. "Yes, I'm looking for Levi Ransom. He was supposed to meet me here. Do you know him? Could you tell me where to find him?" The man's expression changed. Something flickered across his face, pity, perhaps, or discomfort. He glanced away, then back at her. "Levi Ransom," he repeated slowly. "Yes, we're to be married today. I'm Clara Hawthorne from Philadelphia. He should be here. Perhaps he's running late? Could you direct me to his ranch?" The silence that followed was terrible. The old man removed his hat, turning it in his hands. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, the way one might speak to someone about to receive devastating news. "Miss, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Levi Ransom got married 2 weeks ago to Mary Sullivan, the banker's daughter. Had the wedding right here in town. I was there myself." The world tilted. Clara heard the words, understood them on some level, but they didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. That's not possible," she whispered. "He sent for me. He wrote to me. Just 3 weeks ago, he wrote and told me to come, to take the train, that everything was arranged." The man's expression grew more pained. "I don't know what to tell you, miss, but Levi Ransom is married now, has been for 2 weeks. They've gone to Billings for a honeymoon. Won't be back for another week at least." He reached into his coat and pulled out a few coins, holding them out to her. "Here, take this. Get yourself a room at the boarding house. Get warm. I'm real sorry, miss, real sorry." But Clara couldn't move, couldn't think. The coins clinked as he pressed them into her gloved hand, but she barely felt them. The old man gave her one last pitying look, then walked away, disappearing into the light snowfall that was growing heavier by the moment. Clara stood alone on the platform. Around her, the town went about its business. Somewhere, a dog barked. A wagon rattled past on the main street. The train behind her hissed and clanked as the crew prepared for departure. Normal sounds. Ordinary sounds. The sounds of a world that was continuing on while hers fell completely apart. He'd married someone else. 3 weeks ago, he'd told her to come. And 2 weeks ago, he'd married another woman. The carpetbag fell from her numb fingers, landing in the snow with a soft thump. Clara looked down at her dress, her beautiful dress, every stitch a prayer, every seam a hope, white lace against white snow. She'd worn it for 3 days of travel, carefully, protectively, wanting it to be perfect when he saw it, when he saw her. But he would never see it, would never see her. She'd given up everything for this. Her job at the textile factory, her room at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, the small community of friends she'd made. She'd spent every penny she had on the train ticket, on the fabric for this dress, on the journey west. She had nothing, was nothing. An abandoned bride in a strange town, 1,500 miles from anything familiar, wearing a wedding dress made for a man who'd never intended to marry her at all. The tears came then, hot against her frozen cheeks. She didn't sob, didn't cry out. Just stood there as silent tears tracked down her face and the snow began to fall harder. Each flake landed on her dress, melted, soaked in. The careful embroidery along the hem was already wet, the white fabric turning gray with moisture and dirt from the platform. How long she stood there, she didn't know. Time seemed to stop meaning anything. The cold seeped through her dress, through her skin, into her very bones. Her fingers went numb. Her feet lost all feeling. But still, she stood, unable to move, unable to think beyond the simple, devastating truth. She had nowhere to go. The train whistle blew, a warning that it would depart soon. Clara didn't move. Let it go. What did it matter? She couldn't go back to Philadelphia, had no money for a ticket even if she wanted to. And forward? Forward into Silver Ridge, where everyone would soon know, if they didn't already, that she was the fool who'd traveled 1,500 miles to marry a man who'd chosen someone else. The whistle blew again. The train began to move, slowly at first, then faster. It pulled away from the platform, leaving her behind, and still Clara stood frozen. Not from the cold now, but from the absolute certainty that she had made the worst mistake of her life. Finally, when her legs could no longer support her, she sank down onto a bench at the edge of the platform. The wet snow soaked immediately through her dress, but she didn't care. Couldn't care. She bent forward, covering her face with her hands, and let the tears come harder now. Silent, wrenching sobs that shook her shoulders and stole her breath. She'd been a fool, such a fool. She'd believed the letters, believed in the possibility of love with a stranger, believed that she could build a new life, a better life, out here in the wilderness. But the truth was brutally simple. She was nobody. Nothing. Just another desperate woman who'd gambled everything and lost. The embroidered handkerchief, she pulled it from her bag where she'd kept it safe. L and C intertwined, forever joined. What a joke! She pressed it to her face, soaking it with tears, and wondered distantly if this was how a person simply gave up. If this was the moment when the fight drained out entirely, leaving only an empty shell too tired to even try anymore. "Papa, look!" The voice was small, high-pitched. A child's voice, cutting through the sound of wind and Clara's quiet weeping. "Papa, there's a lady. She's crying." Clara didn't look up, couldn't bear to have her misery witnessed, couldn't face the pity she knew she'd see in whatever stranger had stopped to observe her humiliation. "I see her, Lily. Hush now." A man's voice, deep, rough with the edges worn smooth, like river stones. Footsteps in the snow approaching, then stopping. "Miss, are you all right?" It was possibly the most ridiculous question Clara had ever heard. Was she all right? She was sitting on a train platform in a wedding dress in the middle of a snowstorm, in a town where she knew no one, abandoned by a man who'd never intended to keep his promises. All right didn't even exist in the same world as her current circumstances. But she looked up anyway, because years of social training died hard, and when someone addressed you, you responded. The man standing before her was tall, very tall, with broad shoulders beneath a heavy sheepskin coat. Dark hair showed beneath his hat, and his face was weathered in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Dark eyes that held something she hadn't expected to see, genuine concern. Beside him stood a little girl, perhaps 5 years old, bundled in so many layers she looked almost round. The child's face was mostly hidden by a wool scarf, but her eyes, the same dark color as the man's, were wide as they stared at Clara. Clara's voice came out hoarse. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I'm fine. Thank you." The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting to both of them. The man studied her for a long moment. Behind him, a wagon waited, a sturdy-looking horse standing patiently in the traces. He glanced at the wagon, then back at Clara, clearly debating something with himself. "You don't look fine," he said finally. "You look like you're about to freeze to death." He shrugged out of his coat. "Here." "No, Clara started to protest, but he'd already draped the coat around her shoulders. The warmth was immediate and overwhelming. She clutched at it instinctively, drawing it closer, and felt tears threaten again at this simple kindness from a stranger. "Papa," the little girl whispered, tugging on her father's sleeve. She stood on tiptoe, and he bent down so she could whisper in his ear. Clara watched as the child's lips moved, saw the man's expression change. Something flickering across his features that looked almost like pain. He straightened, clearing his throat. "My daughter says—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "She says you look like someone who could use a warm fire and a hot meal. Our ranch isn't far. You're welcome to come with us, get yourself warmed up. No strings, no expectations. Just a fire and food." Clara stared at him. This stranger offering shelter. It could be a trap, of course. She'd heard stories about what happened to unprotected women on the frontier. But looking into his eyes, at the little girl who watched her with such open curiosity, she didn't sense danger, just kindness. Simple, uncomplicated kindness that she desperately needed. "I don't want to impose," she whispered. You're not imposing if I'm offering. He held out his hand. Name's Elijah Carter. This is my daughter Lily. Clara looked at that outstretched hand for a long moment. This was a crossroads, she realized. She could refuse, could take the coins the old man had given her and try to find that boarding house. Spend her last few dollars on a room while she figured out… What? What would she figure out? She had no money, no prospects, no way forward or back, or she could take this man's hand. Trust a stranger because she had no other choice. She reached out, her fingers numb and clumsy in her wet gloves, and placed her hand in his. His grip was strong, steady, warm even through both their gloves. Clara Hawthorne, she said quietly. From Philadelphia. Something shifted in his expression, recognition, perhaps, or understanding. He'd probably heard about the mail-order bride who was supposed to arrive today. Probably knew exactly what had happened, but he didn't say anything about it, just helped her to her feet and retrieved her carpet bag from where it had fallen in the snow. Philadelphia is a long way from Montana, was all he said. Yes, Clara agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, it is. Lily danced ahead of them toward the wagon, then turned back, bouncing impatiently. Come on, miss, before we all turn into snowmen. Despite everything, Clara felt her lips twitch with the ghost of a smile. The little girl's enthusiasm was infectious, a bright spot in the darkness that had swallowed her day. Elijah guided her to the wagon, his hand at her elbow, steadying her when she stumbled on numb feet. He helped her up onto the seat, then handed up her carpet bag before lifting Lily up between them. The little girl immediately snuggled against Clara's side, apparently deciding they were friends already. Elijah climbed up and took the reins. With a soft word to the horse, they began to move, leaving the train platform behind. Clara looked back once, seeing her wet footprints in the snow, the bench where she'd sat and wept. It already looked distant, like something from a dream or a nightmare. How long were you sitting there? Elijah asked as they turned onto the main street. His voice was conversational, but Clara heard the concern beneath it. I don't know, she admitted. The train arrived just after 2, I think. What time is it now? Nearly 4. 2 hours. She'd been sitting in the snow, in a wet dress, in sub-zero temperatures for 2 hours. The realization made her shiver violently, and Elijah frowned. Lily, there's a blanket in the back. Can you get it for Miss Hawthorne? The little girl scrambled around, retrieving a thick wool blanket that Elijah proceeded to tuck around Clara with surprising gentleness. Got to warm you up slowly, he said. Too fast, and it'll hurt worse. Clara nodded, though she was already starting to hurt. As sensation returned to her fingers and toes, they began to burn and ache. She bit her lip against the discomfort, not wanting to complain. This man, this stranger, had already done more for her than she had any right to expect. They rode through the town, and Clara tried not to notice the people who stopped to stare. A woman in a wedding dress, riding in Elijah Carter's wagon. The gossip would spread like wildfire. But what did it matter? Her reputation was already ruined the moment Levi Ransom had married someone else. Soon, the buildings gave way to open land. Snow-covered fields stretched in every direction, broken by occasional stands of trees. Mountains rose in the distance, purple-gray against the darkening sky. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, so different from Philadelphia's crowded streets and brick buildings. Are you cold, miss? Lily's voice piped up. The little girl was looking at her with such genuine concern that Clara felt her throat tighten. I'm warming up, Clara assured her. Thank you for asking. Papa says we have to be kind to people who are sad. Are you sad? Lily, Elijah said quietly, a gentle warning in his tone. But Clara shook her head. It's all right. She looked down at the little girl's earnest face. Yes, I'm sad. But your kindness is helping. Lily seemed satisfied with this answer. She snuggled closer, her small body radiating warmth. I like your dress, she said. It's pretty, like a princess dress. Clara's hand went automatically to the wet, dirty fabric. Thank you. I made it myself. Really? Lily's eyes went wide. You made it all by yourself? Even the flower parts? Even the embroidery, yes. Wow. Lily touched the fabric gently, reverently. I want to make dresses when I grow up. Can you teach me? The question was so innocent, so hopeful, that Clara felt tears threaten again. I don't know how long I'll be here, sweetheart. You could stay forever, Lily suggested brightly. Papa says our house has lots of room, right, Papa? Elijah cleared his throat, his hands tightening slightly on the reins. Let's just get Miss Hawthorne warmed up first, Lily. One thing at a time. They rode in silence after that, with only the sound of the horses' hooves in the snow and the creak of the wagon wheels. Clara watched the landscape pass, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning she'd woken up with such hope, such certainty about her future. And now she was sitting in a stranger's wagon, wearing a wedding dress made for a man who'd betrayed her, heading toward a ranch she'd never heard of with no idea what came next. Here we are, Elijah said finally. Clara looked up and saw a house emerging from the swirling snow. It was bigger than she'd expected, a solid two-story structure with a wide porch and smoke rising from the chimney. A barn stood nearby, and she could see other outbuildings in the distance. This was a working ranch, clearly. Not wealthy, perhaps, but well-maintained and prosperous-looking. Elijah brought the wagon to a stop near the house and jumped down, then reached up to help Lily. The little girl ran ahead to the door, calling back, "Hurry! I want to show her my room." He turned to Clara, offering his hand again. She took it and climbed down, her legs stiff and aching from the cold and the stillness. She stumbled, and his arm went around her waist, steadying her. "Sorry," she whispered. "Nothing to be sorry for." He kept his arm there, supporting her as they walked to the door. "You've had a hell of a day." The mild profanity should have shocked her, but instead it made something loosen in her chest. He wasn't pretending, wasn't going to dance around what had happened with polite fictions. It had been a hell of a day, and he was acknowledging that simple truth. The door opened and warmth rushed out to meet them. Lily stood in the doorway, bouncing impatiently. "Come in, come in!" Clara stepped inside, and the change in temperature made her gasp. A fire roared in a large stone fireplace, filling the room with blessed heat. The interior was neat, if simply furnished. A large kitchen area took up one side with a heavy wooden table and chairs. The other side held a sitting area with worn but comfortable-looking furniture. Stairs led up to what must be bedrooms. It was a home, a real home, lived in and loved. "Sit here," Elijah guided her to a chair near the fireplace. "Lily, get the basin. We need to warm her hands and feet in cool water first." As Lily scampered off, Elijah knelt in front of Clara. "Your feet," he said simply. "We need to get these wet shoes off." Clara wanted to protest. This was far too intimate, too improper, but her hands were shaking too badly to manage the laces herself. And when she tried to reach down, a wave of dizziness swept over her. Elijah worked quickly and efficiently, unlacing her boots and peeling off her wet stockings with a clinical detachment that somehow made it less embarrassing. Her feet were an alarming shade of white-blue, and when he touched them, checking for sensation, she winced. "Can you feel that?" "Yes. It hurts." "Good. Hurting is good, means no lasting damage." He looked up at her, his dark eyes serious. "You could have lost toes today, Miss Hawthorne. Or worse." The reality of that settled over her. She'd been so lost in her grief and shock that she hadn't even thought about the danger. Hadn't cared, really. What was frostbite compared to a shattered future? Lily returned with a basin of water, sloshing it slightly in her eagerness. Elijah took it from her and placed it on the floor. "This is going to hurt," he warned Clara, "but it's necessary." He took her feet in his hands, large, calloused, surprisingly gentle, and lowered them into the water. Pain exploded through her, sharp and immediate. Clara gasped, biting back a cry. "I know," Elijah said quietly. "I know it hurts, but you have to keep them in." "Got to warm them slowly." Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face now, partly from the pain, partly from everything else. Lily pressed close to her side, patting her arm comfortingly. "You're very brave," the little girl said solemnly. "Papa, she's being very brave, isn't she?" "Very brave," Elijah agreed. He stood and moved to the kitchen, and Clara heard him working, the clank of pots, the pump of water, the crackle of the fire. "Lily, can you help Miss Hawthorne out of that coat? Carefully." Lily helped Clara shrug off the sheepskin coat, revealing the full disaster of her wedding dress underneath. The white fabric was stained gray with dirt and snow, the hem torn in places. The careful embroidery ruined. Clara looked down at herself and felt fresh tears threaten. Everything ruined. Every hope, every dream, every carefully stitched plan. "Don't cry," Lily whispered, hugging her arm. "Papa will make it better. He always makes things better." Clara managed a watery smile for the child. "I hope so." Elijah returned with a cup of something hot. "Chamomile tea with honey," he said, pressing it into her hands. "Drink slowly." The warmth of the cup felt like heaven against her frozen fingers. Clara brought it to her lips and sipped, the sweet liquid warming her from the inside out. It was the first thing she'd had to eat or drink since morning, she realized. Her stomach growled audibly. "Lily, set the table," Elijah said. "We're having an early supper." As the little girl bustled about, Elijah knelt again to check Clara's feet. The pain was subsiding into a fierce tingling, pins and needles spreading through every toe. She gritted her teeth against it. "Color's coming back," he said. "That's good." He looked up at her. "How do you feel? Lightheaded? Confused?" "No, just, tired." That was an understatement. She felt exhausted down to her very soul. "That's the cold and the shock. You'll need rest, but food first." He stood again and went back to the kitchen. Clara watched him move around the space with easy familiarity. Watched as Lily helped in the way of young children, more hindrance than help, but clearly wanted and included. This was their routine, their life, and she was intruding on it, a stranger in a ruined wedding dress who had nowhere else to go. "Mr. Carter," she said suddenly. He glanced over. "Elijah, please." "Elijah, I should explain about—" She gestured helplessly at her dress, at herself. "About why I was at the station. You don't owe me an explanation." "But I do. You've been so kind, and you don't even know." "I know you were waiting for Levi Ransom," Elijah said quietly, his attention on the pot he was stirring. "I know he wasn't there. I don't need to know more than that unless you want to tell me." The relief was overwhelming. He wasn't going to push, wasn't going to demand her story in exchange for his help. "He sent for me," she said anyway, needing to say it out loud, needing someone to know that she hadn't been completely foolish. "We'd been corresponding for 6 months. He asked me to come, said everything was arranged for our wedding. I wore this dress." Her voice broke. "I wore this dress for 3 days of travel because I wanted it to be perfect when he saw me." Elijah stopped stirring, but he didn't turn around, just listened. "The old man at the station told me Levi married someone else 2 weeks ago, after he sent that last letter telling me to come." The words tumbled out now, all the hurt and confusion and betrayal. "I don't understand. Why would he do that? Why send for me if he was planning to marry someone else?" "I don't know," Elijah said, "but I'm sorry it happened to you. You didn't deserve that." Those simple words, "you didn't deserve that," broke something open in Clara's chest. Because she'd been telling herself all afternoon that she had deserved it, that she'd been a fool, that she should have known better than to trust a stranger's letters. But this man, this stranger who'd stopped to help her, was telling her that the cruelty wasn't her fault. Supper was simple but warm, stew thick with vegetables and venison, fresh bread, more tea. Clara ate mechanically at first, then with growing hunger as her body reminded her of its needs. Across the table, Lily chattered about her day, about the new calf in the barn, about her favorite doll who needed a new dress. "Can Miss Clara make Rosie a dress?" Lily asked. "Since she's so good at sewing." "Lily, Miss Hawthorne is our guest, not a seamstress for hire," Elijah said gently. But Clara found herself smiling, a real smile, the first all day. "I'd be happy to make Rosie a dress," she said, "if I'm here long enough." "You can stay as long as you need," Elijah said, meeting her eyes across the table. "I meant what I said. No strings, no expectations. You need time to figure things out. You're welcome to that time here." "But I can't. I don't have any money. I can't pay you." "Did I ask for payment?" "No, but then we're settled." His tone was firm but not unkind. "You've had a shock. You need rest and safety while you decide what to do next. I can provide that. End of discussion." Clara stared at him, searching for the catch. There had to be one. Men didn't just offer women shelter and food with no expectations. But in his face, she saw only honest concern and a certain stubborn determination. Thank you, she whispered, and meant it with every fiber of her being. After supper, Elijah showed her to a small room upstairs. This was going to be Lily's room when she got older, he explained. It's not much, but the bed's good, and it's warm. The room was indeed small, just a bed, a dresser, and a washstand, but it was clean and cozy, with a window overlooking the darkened landscape. Clara set her carpet bag down on the bed. There are night clothes in the dresser, Elijah said. They were my wife's. She was about your size. I kept meaning to... He trailed off, clearing his throat. Anyway, you're welcome to use them, and I'll have Lily bring up water so you can wash. Your wife? Clara turned to him, surprised. She'd assumed he was a widower from the way he and Lily functioned alone, but to offer her his late wife's clothes... She passed 3 years ago, Elijah said quietly. Fever. It took her quick. He paused at the door. Lily says you look like her. That's why she noticed you on the platform. It's not true. You don't really look like Sarah at all, but there's something, I don't know, something about your face or your manner. It reminded her. He shook his head. I'm sorry, you don't need to hear about that. No, I'm honored, Clara said, and I'm sorry for your loss. 3 years is long enough to make peace with it, he said, but Lily still misses her mother. So if she clings to you while you're here, I hope you'll understand. Of course. He nodded and left, pulling the door closed behind him. Alone for the first time since the train station, Clara sank onto the bed. The events of the day washed over her in waves, the hope she'd felt that morning, the devastating revelation, the cold and the tears, and then this unexpected kindness from strangers. She didn't know what to make of any of it. She opened the dresser and found the night clothes, simple but well made, in a soft white cotton. There were other clothes too, she noticed, day dresses, aprons, shawls, a whole wardrobe left behind by a dead woman, now offered to her. A soft knock at the door preceded Lily's entrance. The little girl carried a pitcher of warm water carefully in both hands, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Papa said to bring this, and I brought Rosie. She held up a worn rag doll with button eyes and yarn hair. So you won't be lonely. Clara took the pitcher and set it in the basin, then accepted the doll gravely. Thank you, Lily. That's very thoughtful. Papa says you've had a sad day and might need extra kindness, Lily said, climbing onto the bed and swinging her legs. When I have sad days, he lets me help with the horses. Do you like horses? I've never been around them much, Clara admitted. Oh, then you have to meet Daisy. She's my special horse. Well, she's Papa's, but he lets me brush her and give her apples. She's brown with a white star on her nose. Lily's hands flew as she described the horse, her whole face alight with enthusiasm. Clara found herself listening, letting the child's cheerful chatter wash over her like a balm. This little girl, who'd lost her mother so young, had still managed to retain this bright, open heart. It was humbling and beautiful. Lily, time for bed, Elijah's voice called from downstairs. But I'm not tired, Lily protested, even as a yawn overtook her. Clara smiled. Go on, I'll still be here in the morning. Promise? The question was so earnest, so hopeful, that Clara felt her heart constrict. I promise, she said, and meant it. After Lily left, Clara undressed slowly, peeling off the ruined wedding dress and hanging it on a peg. In the morning, she'd see if it could be salvaged, though she didn't know why she'd bother. She'd never wear it again. Never have reason to. She washed with the warm water, scrubbing away the grime and the tears, then put on the nightgown. It fit perfectly, and she wondered about the woman who'd worn it before. Sarah. What had she been like? Had she loved this view from this window? Had she been happy here? Clara climbed into bed and pulled the quilts up to her chin. The mattress was comfortable, the room warm. Outside, the wind howled and snow pattered against the window. But here, she was safe. Fed, warm, and safe. For the first time since stepping off that train, Clara allowed herself to simply breathe, to exist in this moment without thinking about yesterday's hopes or tomorrow's terrors. Just this: a warm bed, a full stomach, and the kindness of strangers who'd had no reason to help her except that it was the right thing to do. She clutched Lily's doll to her chest and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions to make. But tonight, she would rest. And somewhere in the house below, she heard the low murmur of Elijah's voice as he read to Lily, heard the little girl's sleepy response, heard the creak of floorboards as father and daughter went through their nighttime routine. Clara had come to Montana to marry a stranger and build a new life. She'd ended up in a different stranger's home instead, her wedding dress hanging on a peg, her future more uncertain than ever. But as she drifted off to sleep, warm and safe for the first time in days, she couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, fate had been kinder to her today than it had seemed. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was Lily's voice, drifting up through the floorboards. "Papa, do you think Miss Clara will stay?" And Elijah's quiet response, "I don't know, sweetheart, but I hope she rests well tonight." So did Clara. So did Clara. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of voices below. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. This wasn't her narrow bed at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, wasn't the lurching berth on the train. Then memory crashed back. The station, the snow, the wedding dress, Elijah Carter's kind eyes, and his daughter's whispered words. She sat up slowly, her body aching in places she hadn't known could ache. Her feet throbbed dully, a reminder of how close she'd come to serious harm yesterday. The room was cold despite the sunlight, and she could see her breath misting in the air. She reached for Sarah Carter's shawl, wrapping it around her shoulders before padding to the window. The view stole her breath. Snow-covered fields stretched to the horizon, pristine and glittering in the morning light. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks catching the sun like crowns of fire. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache, vast and wild and utterly unlike anything she'd known in Philadelphia's crowded streets. A knock at the door made her turn. "Miss Clara?" Lily's voice called softly. "Are you awake? Papa made breakfast." Clara opened the door to find the little girl already dressed for the day, her dark hair in two neat braids. "Good morning, Lily." "Good morning. Did you sleep well? Did Rosie keep you company? Are you hungry? Papa made pancakes and they're really good and—" Lily stopped abruptly, seeming to remember something. "Papa says I talk too much in the mornings. Sorry." Clara couldn't help but smile. "I like hearing you talk. And yes, I'm very hungry." "Then come down. But you should get dressed first. Do you need help? I can help. I help Papa with buttons sometimes when his fingers are too cold." The offer was so earnest that Clara felt warmth bloom in her chest. "That would be lovely. Thank you." Together they sorted through Sarah's clothes in the dresser. Clara chose a simple gray wool dress with a white collar, practical and warm. Lily chattered the whole time, telling Clara about the ranch, about the animals, about her daily routines with the naturalness of a child who hadn't learned to guard her words yet. "Papa gets up really early," Lily explained as she helped with the buttons down Clara's back. "Before the sun even. He says the animals don't care what time it is, they need feeding. And in winter, everything takes longer because of the snow. Do you know about snow, Miss Clara? We get lots of snow here, mountains and mountains of it." "I know a little about snow," Clara said, thinking of Philadelphia's winters. But she suspected Montana's snow was different, deeper, colder, more unforgiving. "There, all done." Lily stepped back to admire her handiwork. "You look pretty. Not princess pretty like yesterday's dress, but nice pretty, warm pretty." Clara looked down at herself. The dress fit well enough, though it was slightly loose in the waist. Sarah Carter had been a bit fuller figured, apparently. Still, it was clean and whole, and that was more than could be said for her wedding dress. Downstairs, Elijah was at the stove, his back to them as they descended. He wore work clothes, heavy trousers, a flannel shirt, suspenders, and his dark hair was still damp, as if he'd washed recently. He turned at their footsteps, and something flickered across his face when he saw Clara in his wife's dress. Pain? Recognition? It was gone too quickly for her to identify. "Morning," he said simply. "Coffee's on. Pancakes will be ready in a minute." "Thank you." Clara moved to the table where Lily was already bouncing in her seat. "Can I help with anything?" "Just sit. You're still recovering." His tone brooked no argument, so Clara sat. The kitchen smelled wonderful, coffee and butter and something sweet. Elijah worked efficiently, flipping pancakes with practiced ease while Lily kept up a running commentary about everything and nothing. Clara watched them, this father and daughter who moved around each other with the unconscious coordination of long practice, and felt like an intruder in their carefully balanced world. Elijah set a plate before her, 3 golden pancakes, butter melting between the layers. "There's syrup there, and jam if you prefer." "This is wonderful," Clara said, meaning it. "Thank you." They ate together, the morning sun streaming through the windows. Lily dominated the conversation, telling Clara about her plans for the day, asking questions with barely a breath between them. Elijah ate quietly, occasionally interjecting to remind Lily to chew between sentences, but otherwise content to let his daughter chatter. "Lily," he said finally, setting down his fork, "I need to check the fence lines in the north pasture today. It'll take most of the morning. Think you can keep Miss Hawthorne company?" "Yes!" Lily practically vibrated with excitement. "I can show her everything. The barn and the chickens and Daisy and—" "Inside activities," Elijah interrupted gently. "It's too cold for Miss Hawthorne to be outside for long. She needs to stay warm." Lily's face fell for just a moment, then brightened again. "I can show her my books, and we can work on letters, and maybe Miss Clara can teach me to sew like she promised." "I didn't exactly promise," Clara started, but Lily's hopeful expression stopped her. "But I'd be happy to show you some basic stitches, if your father doesn't mind." Elijah looked between them, and Clara saw something soften in his expression. "I don't mind. Lily's been wanting to learn. I can manage buttons and torn seams, but anything more complicated?" He shrugged. "Not my skill set." After breakfast, Elijah prepared to head out. He shrugged into his heavy coat, wrapped a scarf around his neck, pulled on thick gloves. At the door, he paused and turned back to Clara. "There's wood by the fireplace," he said. "Keep the fire going. Don't let it get too low. It's easier to maintain than to rebuild. There's food in the pantry if you get hungry, and if anything happens, if you need anything, the bell by the door, ring it 3 times and I'll hear it, even out in the pasture." "We'll be fine," Clara assured him, though her heart was suddenly hammering. Being left alone with his daughter was a responsibility she hadn't expected. What if something went wrong? What if Lily got hurt, or sick, or— "Papa worries," Lily announced matter-of-factly. "He worries about everything since Mama died. But we'll be okay, won't we, Miss Clara?" Clara managed a smile. "We'll be just fine." Elijah's eyes met hers over Lily's head, and she saw the question there, the hesitation. He was trusting her, a stranger, with his daughter, the most precious thing in his world. The weight of that trust settled on her shoulders. "I'll take good care of her," Claire said softly. "I promise." He nodded, seemed about to say something else, then just pulled his hat down low and stepped out into the cold. Through the window, Clara watched him trudge through the snow toward the barn, his figure dark against the white landscape. "So," Lily said brightly, grabbing Clara's hand, "what should we do first?" They started with letters. Lily had a primer that she was working through, carefully forming each character on a slate with chalk. Clara sat beside her at the table, gently correcting her grip, praising her efforts. The little girl was bright and eager to learn, though easily distracted. "What's Philadelphia like?" Lily asked suddenly, abandoning her letter P halfway through. "Is it very big? Do you have horses there? Did you live in a big house?" Clara thought of her boarding house room, barely large enough for a bed and a washstand. "Philadelphia is very big," she said. "Bigger than you can imagine. Buildings so tall they block out the sun, streets crowded with people and wagons and streetcars. And no, I didn't have a horse. I walked most places, or took the streetcar." "What's a streetcar?" "It's like a wagon, but it runs on metal tracks in the street, and lots of people can ride in it at once." Lily's eyes went wide. "That sounds amazing. Did you like living there?" Did she? Clara considered the question honestly. "Parts of it. I liked my job at the textile factory. I worked in the design room creating patterns for fabrics. And I had friends there, other girls who worked at the factory. We'd have tea together on Sundays sometimes." She paused. "But it was also lonely. My parents died when I was 16. Fever, like your mother. After that, I was on my own. Working, living in a boarding house, getting by, but never quite belonging." Is that why you wanted to marry Mr. Ransom? Lily asked with the directness of children. So you wouldn't be lonely anymore? The question pierced straight through Clara's careful defenses. Yes, she whispered. I suppose that's exactly why. Lily nodded as if this made perfect sense. Papa gets lonely too, I can tell. He tries not to let me see, but sometimes at night I hear him walking around downstairs when he thinks I'm asleep. And sometimes he looks at Mama's picture and his face gets all sad. She leaned closer, conspiratorial. I think he needs a new wife. Then he wouldn't be lonely and I'd have a mama again. Don't you think that's a good idea? Clara's throat tightened. I think, she said carefully, that these things are more complicated than they seem. Your papa loved your mama very much. That kind of love doesn't just go away. But you could stay, Lily pressed. You could stay and be my new mama, and then everyone would be happy. Lily, Clara took the little girl's hands in hers. Sweetheart, I can't just stay. This is your home, not mine, and your papa was kind enough to give me shelter for a little while, but I'll need to figure out what to do next. Where to go. But where will you go? Lily's face crumpled with distress. You said you don't have anywhere. I'll figure something out. I could find work, maybe. Is there a dress shop in town or a hotel that needs help? Even as she said it, Clara knew how unlikely it was. Silver Ridge was a small town. Jobs would be scarce, especially for a woman alone with no references and a scandalous story. But she couldn't tell that to this child who was looking at her with such hope and concern. Let's not worry about that right now, Clara said, steering them back to safer ground. Let's finish your letters, and then I'll show you some sewing stitches. Would you like that? Lily nodded, though the worry didn't entirely leave her face. They returned to the slate, but Clara's mind was elsewhere now, turning over her limited options. She had perhaps $3 to her name, the coins the old man had given her, and a few she'd kept back from the train fare. Not enough to get her anywhere, certainly not back to Philadelphia. And even if she could get back, what would she return to? Her job was gone, given to someone else the day she left. Her room at the boarding house had been rented to a new tenant. She was trapped here with nowhere to go and no way to get there. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she felt a strange numbness. Too much had happened too quickly. Her mind couldn't seem to process it all, so instead it focused on the immediate, helping Lily with her letters, keeping the fire fed, existing in this moment without looking too far ahead. After letters came sewing. Clara found a basket of mending in a corner, shirts that needed buttons, a torn apron, socks with holes. She threaded a needle and showed Lily how to make a simple running stitch on a scrap of cloth. You have to be patient, Clara explained, guiding the little girl's hands. Each stitch should be the same size. See? Like this. In and out, nice and steady. Lily's tongue poked out between her teeth in concentration as she worked. Her stitches were wobbly and uneven, but she was trying so hard that Clara's heart squeezed. That's wonderful, Clara praised. You're a natural. Really? Lily's face lit up. Really? With practice, you'll be making dresses in no time. They worked together in companionable silence, broken only by Lily's occasional questions. Clara found herself relaxing into the rhythm of it, the familiar motion of the needle, the simple satisfaction of mending something torn. This, at least she knew how to do. This skill had value. Miss Clara? Lily's voice was small. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you sad about Mr. Ransom? Clara's hands stilled. She looked at the little girl who watched her with such open concern. There was no judgment there, no pity, just genuine caring. It made something crack in Clara's chest. Yes, she admitted. I am sad. Not because I loved him. I didn't really know him. But I'm sad about what I hoped for, about the life I thought I was coming to build. What kind of life? Clara set down her mending and looked out the window at the snow-covered landscape. A home, she said quietly. A real home, with a family. Children, maybe. A garden in the spring. A place where I belonged. Where I mattered to someone. She laughed softly, bitterly. It sounds foolish when I say it out loud. It doesn't sound foolish, Lily said seriously. It sounds nice. Everyone should have a home. Out of the mouths of babes. Clara blinked back sudden tears and managed a smile. You're very wise for 5 years old. I'm almost 6, Lily corrected. Papa says I'm wise beyond my years. I don't know what that means, but it sounds good. They returned to their sewing, and Clara felt a strange peace settling over her. This wasn't the life she'd imagined, wasn't the home she'd planned for. But there was something soothing about this, sitting by a warm fire with a child beside her, doing useful work with her hands. Something right. Around midday, Clara made lunch from what she found in the pantry: bread and cheese, cold meat, preserved vegetables. Simple fare, but Lily ate enthusiastically, keeping up her constant stream of chatter. Clara found herself actually laughing at one of the girls' stories about a hen that had learned to escape the coop. Papa says Houdini, that's what he named her, is smarter than most people he knows, Lily said through a mouthful of bread. She can open the latch with her beak. Papa had to make a special lock just for her. Your papa seems very clever, Clara observed. He is. He can fix anything, and he's really strong. He can carry me and 2 buckets of water at the same time. And he tells the best stories at bedtime, about cowboys and Indians and mountain lions. Lily paused, considering. But he can't make dresses or do fancy cooking. Mama used to make these cakes that were so good, and Papa tries, but they always turn out flat. He says he's missing the magic touch. There it was again, the ghost of Sarah Carter hovering over this house. Clara wondered what it must be like for Elijah, living in this space filled with memories of the woman he'd loved. Did it comfort him, or was it torment? After lunch, Lily showed Clara her treasures: a collection of stones from the creek, a bird's nest she'd found, a book of fairy tales that was clearly well-loved. They read together, Clara's voice bringing the stories to life while Lily nestled against her side. The afternoon sun was starting to slant through the windows when they heard boots on the porch. Lily jumped up, running to the door as Elijah stomped snow from his feet outside. "Papa, we had the best day. Miss Clara taught me to sew, and we read stories, and she made lunch, and everything was perfect." Elijah came inside, his cheeks reddened from the cold, snow dusting his shoulders. His eyes found Clara immediately, as if checking that everything was indeed all right. "The fence line?" Clara asked. "Fixed. 2 breaks, but nothing major." He shrugged out of his coat, hanging it by the door. "Everything okay here?" Everything was fine, Clara assured him. Lily was wonderful. Something in his expression softened. "She usually is." He ruffled his daughter's hair. "Did you practice your letters?" "Yes, and Miss Clara says I'm getting much better. And Papa, she showed me how to sew, and I made stitches, and they were wobbly, but she said with practice, I'll be making dresses." Elijah's eyes met Clara's over Lily's head, and she saw gratitude there. "Sounds like you both had a productive day." That evening followed a pattern that Clara suspected was their routine. Elijah saw to the animals, milking the cow, feeding the horses and chickens, checking on everything one final time before dark. Lily helped Clara prepare supper, setting the table and chattering about her day. They ate together as the sun set beyond the mountains, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. After supper, Elijah read to Lily from her fairy tale book while Clara washed the dishes. She could hear his voice, deep and steady, bringing the story to life. Could hear Lily's occasional questions and comments. It was domestic and peaceful, and so far removed from the chaos of her life just yesterday that it felt like a dream. When Lily was in bed and the house had grown quiet, Clara found herself alone with Elijah for the first time. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, the crackle of burning wood the only sound between them for long minutes. "Thank you," Elijah said finally, "for today. For being patient with Lily. She can be a lot." "She's wonderful," Clara said honestly. "Bright and curious and so full of life. You're doing a remarkable job with her." He shifted, uncomfortable with the praise. "I do my best, but there are things—" He trailed off, staring into the fire. "Things a father can't teach a daughter. Things she needs a woman for." Clara understood what he wasn't saying. "You must miss your wife very much." "Every day." His voice was rough. She was everything good, patient and kind and always knowing just what to say. I still don't understand why she was taken. What purpose could there be in leaving a child without her mother, a man without his wife?" He shook his head. "Sorry, you don't need to hear this." "It's all right," Clara said softly. "Grief needs to be spoken sometimes." They sat in silence again, but it was a different quality now. Not awkward, but companionable. Two people who'd both lost things, sitting together in the quiet. "What will you do?" Elijah asked eventually. "You can stay as long as you need, but I imagine you'll want to make plans." The question Clara had been avoiding all day. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have almost no money, no prospects. I could try to find work in town, but Silver Ridge doesn't have much to offer," Elijah finished. "And your situation, what happened with Ransom, people will talk. They already are, I'm sure." He didn't deny it. Small towns have long memories and sharp tongues. Clara pulled Sarah's shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I won't impose on your hospitality much longer. A few days, perhaps, until I can figure out—" "You're not imposing," Elijah's voice was firm. "And I'm not throwing you out into the cold to fend for yourself. That's not how things are done." He paused, seemed to wrestle with something. "There might be another option." Clara looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "The ranch. It's a lot of work for one person. And Lily needs things I can't give her. A woman's influence, someone to teach her things, talk to her about things." He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "What I'm saying is, if you wanted to stay, there'd be work for you. Helping with Lily, with the house. I could pay you a small wage, room and board, plus something to save toward whatever comes next." Clara stared at him. "You're offering me a position? If you want it, no pressure. But it would help me, and it would give you time to figure things out without having to worry about where your next meal is coming from." He met her eyes directly. "I won't pretend there aren't complications. People will talk no matter what. But my reputation can weather it, and you'd be under my protection. No one would dare say anything too bold while you're living under my roof." It was practical, Clara realized, a solution that benefited them both. He got help with his daughter and his home. She got time and safety, and a small wage to build something for her future. It made perfect sense. So why did her heart feel strange at the thought? "I couldn't," she started. "It wouldn't be proper. You're a widower, I'm an unmarried woman. Lily would be our chaperone," Elijah said with a slight smile. "Hard to get up to anything improper with a 5-year-old around. And besides, this is Montana, not Philadelphia. The rules are different out here. What matters is survival and decency, in that order." Clara thought about her options. Go into town and try to find work, knowing everyone would know her story. Try to save enough for passage east, back to a city where she had nothing waiting for her. Or stay here, in this warm house, with this kind man and his daughter, and have time to heal and plan and decide what she really wanted. "I'd work hard," she said slowly. "I'd earn my keep. And the moment you felt it was too much, or Lily was uncomfortable or anything, I'd leave immediately." "So that's a yes?" "Was it?" Clara looked around the room, at the fire burning cheerfully, at the simple furniture that spoke of a home loved and lived in, at the stairs leading up to the bedroom where a little girl slept peacefully. She thought of Lily's bright chatter, of the simple satisfaction of teaching her to sew, of sitting here tonight with Elijah and feeling like maybe she wasn't completely alone in the world. "Yes," she said quietly. "If you're sure, then yes. I'll stay." Something shifted in Elijah's expression, relief, maybe, or satisfaction. He nodded once, decisively. "Good. That's settled then." They talked a bit more, working out practical details. Clara would help with Lily, with cooking and mending and keeping house. Elijah would continue his ranch work and would teach Clara what she needed to know about living in Montana. The wage he named was modest but fair, and he promised it would be paid in coin, not just room and board, so she could save toward independence. When Clara finally climbed the stairs to her small room, her mind was spinning. In the space of 2 days, her entire life had transformed. She'd come west to marry a man who'd betrayed her. She'd nearly frozen to death on a train platform. And now she was living in a widower's home, caring for his daughter, building some kind of new life she hadn't anticipated. She should have been terrified. Should have been grieving still for the future she'd lost. But as she changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, what she felt was something else entirely. Something tentative and fragile, but undeniably real. Hope. Maybe her story wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning. Outside, the wind howled across the prairie and snow fell silently through the darkness. But inside, Clara was warm and safe, and for now that was enough. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Clara woke each morning to the sound of Elijah moving quietly through the house before dawn, tending to animals and ranch work that couldn't wait. By the time she came downstairs, the fire would already be crackling, coffee made, the kitchen warm against the brutal cold outside. He never said much in those early hours, just nodded a greeting before heading back out into the darkness, leaving Clara to prepare breakfast and wake Lily. The little girl became her constant companion. Together they cooked and cleaned, read and sewed, filled the hours with work and laughter and the easy conversation that bloomed between them. Lily soaked up Clara's attention like parched earth drinking rain, and Clara found herself giving it freely, surprised by how naturally affection grew when you spent your days with someone so open-hearted. A week passed, then two. The work was harder than anything Clara had done in Philadelphia. Hauling water, scrubbing floors, kneading bread until her arms ached, mending by dim lamplight until her eyes burned. But it was also satisfying in a way factory work had never been. She could see the results of her labor immediately. The house grew cleaner, more organized. Meals appeared on the table, hot and nourishing. Lily's dresses were mended, her lessons progressing. And slowly, carefully, something else began to happen. The house that had been heavy with absence started to feel lighter. Clara heard it in the way Lily laughed more freely, in the way Elijah's shoulders seemed less burdened when he came in from the cold. She felt it in herself too, a loosening of the tight knot of grief and shame she'd carried since that day on the platform. But the peace was fragile, and Clara knew it. She was living on borrowed time in a borrowed life, and eventually something would have to give. It was a Tuesday morning in early March when Lily woke with a cough. Nothing alarming at first, just a little tickle that made her clear her throat between bites of breakfast. But by afternoon, the cough had deepened, and when Clara pressed her hand to the little girl's forehead, she felt heat radiating through her palm. "Lily, sweetheart, I think you have a fever," Clara said, trying to keep her voice calm even as worry spiked through her chest. "I'm fine," Lily insisted, though her cheeks were flushed and her eyes too bright. "Can we still read our story?" "Later. Right now you need to rest." Clara guided her to the sofa near the fire, tucking quilts around her. "I'm going to make you some tea with honey. That'll help your throat." But even as she moved through the familiar motions of preparing the tea, fear crept cold fingers around Clara's heart. She'd seen fever before, had watched it take her parents within days of each other, had held her mother's hand as the life burned out of her. Fever was a killer on the frontier where doctors were scarce and medicine even scarcer. When Elijah came in for the midday meal, he took one look at his daughter and went pale. "How long has she been like this?" "The cough started this morning. The fever came on about an hour ago." Clara handed him the cup of tea she'd made. "I've been giving her liquids, keeping her warm, but not too warm." Elijah crouched beside the sofa, his large hand gentle on Lily's forehead, his jaw clenched. "She's burning up." "Papa, I'm fine," Lily said, but her voice was weak, the bravado transparent. "I should ride to town, get the doctor," Elijah said, standing abruptly. "The doctor's gone to Helena," Clara said quietly. She'd overheard this in town during her one brief trip for supplies. "Won't be back for another week at least. There's a woman, Mrs. Brennan. People say she knows healing, herbs and such." Elijah ran his hand through his hair, frustration and fear warring in his expression. Sarah always knew what to do. She had remedies, knew which herbs for which ailment. I should have paid more attention, should have learned. "You can't think like that." Clara's voice was firm. "Right now, we focus on what we can do. I'll ride to Mrs. Brennan's if you tell me where to go. You stay with Lily." "You can't ride. The roads are still icy and you don't know the way." "Then tell me what to do," Clara said, hearing the edge of desperation in her own voice. "Tell me how to help her." They stared at each other across the room, both afraid, both feeling helpless. Then Lily coughed again, a deep rattling sound that made them both turn. "I'll go to Mrs. Brennan's," Elijah said decisively. "You stay with Lily. Keep her comfortable. Keep the fever from getting too high. Cool cloths if she gets too hot. Warm tea. Lots of water. If she gets worse, If she starts struggling to breathe or becomes confused, ring the bell and don't stop until I come back." He was out the door within minutes, and Clara heard the thunder of hoofbeats as he rode hard toward town. Then it was just her and Lily in the quiet house, with only the crackle of the fire and the little girl's labored breathing to break the silence. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Clara sat beside Lily, bathing her face with cool water when the fever spiked, wrapping her in quilts when she shivered with chills. She sang songs she remembered from childhood, told stories, held the little girl's hand and tried to project a calm she didn't feel. "Miss Clara?" Lily's voice was hoarse. "Am I going to die like Mama did?" The question struck Clara like a physical blow. "No," she said fiercely, gripping Lily's hand tighter. "No, sweetheart. You're going to be fine. Your papa went to get medicine, and we're going to take care of you, and you're going to get better. Promise?" Clara thought of all the promises that had been broken in her life. Thought of her parents, who'd promised to always be there. Thought of Levi's letters full of promises that meant nothing. But looking into this child's frightened eyes, she made a promise anyway, reckless and fierce. "I promise, you're going to be fine." As afternoon bled into evening, the fever climbed higher. Lily drifted in and out of sleep, sometimes lucid, sometimes mumbling words that made no sense. Clara changed the cool cloths again and again, coaxed water down the little girl's throat, and prayed to a God she wasn't sure was listening. "Please," she thought desperately, "please don't take this child. She's already lost her mother. Elijah has already lost his wife. They've suffered enough. Please." Darkness fell, and still Elijah didn't return. Clara lit lamps, kept the fire burning, and refused to leave Lily's side even for a moment. The little girl's breathing grew more labored, and Clara's fear crystallized into something cold and sharp in her chest. She was going to lose her. After all this, after finding this unexpected place where she felt needed and wanted, she was going to watch this beautiful child slip away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "No," Clara whispered fiercely. "No, you don't get to leave. You hear me, Lily Carter? You don't get to leave us." And then, because she didn't know what else to do, Clara began to sing. Not the children's songs she'd been singing earlier, but a lullaby, one her mother used to sing when Clara was small and frightened in the dark. "Hush now, my darling, close your weary eyes. Angels are watching from the evening skies. Sleep now, my baby, let your worries cease. Morning will find you wrapped in perfect peace." The words flowed out of her, soft and low, and she sang them over and over, a prayer set to melody. She cradled Lily against her chest, rocking gently, feeling the little girl's fevered body burning through the fabric of her dress. She didn't hear the door open, didn't know Elijah had returned until she looked up and saw him standing in the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders, his face carved from stone. But his eyes held something raw and broken as he watched Clara holding his daughter, singing the same lullaby Sarah had once sung. For a long moment, they just stared at each other across the room. Then Elijah moved, setting down a bundle Mrs. Brennan had given him, crossing to where Clara sat. He knelt beside them, his hand going to Lily's forehead. "The fever's worse," he said, his voice rough. "I know. I've been trying." Clara's voice broke. "I've been doing everything I can." "I know you have." His hand covered hers where it rested on Lily's shoulder. The touch was brief but deliberate, a gesture of solidarity, of shared fear, of trust. Mrs. Brennan sent willow bark tea and something she calls fever root, said to steep them together, give it to her every 2 hours. They worked together in the kitchen, Elijah preparing the medicine while Clara kept watch over Lily. When the tea was ready, they managed to coax some down the little girl's throat, though she grimaced at the bitter taste. "I know it's awful, sweetheart," Elijah murmured, his voice breaking on the endearment. "But you have to drink it, please." After, they settled into a vigil. Elijah pulled a chair close to the sofa, and Clara took up her position on Lily's other side. Between them, the child burned with fever, her small body fighting a battle they couldn't see or help with. "I can't lose her," Elijah said suddenly, the words torn from somewhere deep. "She's all I have left. If I lose her too—" "You won't," Clara said with more conviction than she felt. "We won't let that happen." The hours crawled by. Midnight came and went. They took turns administering the medicine, changing the cool cloths, checking Lily's breathing. Sometimes they spoke in low voices about nothing important, just words to fill the terrible silence. Sometimes they sat without speaking, each lost in their own prayers and fears. Around 3 in the morning, Clara found herself telling Elijah about her parents, about watching them die, about the helplessness and rage she'd felt, about how she'd promised herself she'd never feel that powerless again, and yet here she was, facing the same demon. "I understand why you left Philadelphia," Elijah said quietly. "Why you came west looking for something different. After Sarah died, I thought about leaving too, taking Lily and just running, trying to outpace the grief." He looked down at his daughter. "But you can't outrun pain. It follows you wherever you go. All you can do is learn to carry it." "Is that what you've been doing? Carrying it?" "Trying to. Some days are better than others." He met her eyes across Lily's sleeping form. "It's been better since you came. Easier. Like the weight isn't quite so heavy when there's someone else to help bear it." Clara's throat tightened. "I feel the same. Being here, helping with Lily, having work that matters, it's made the grief lighter somehow. Given me purpose." "You've given us more than you know," Elijah said. "This house was so quiet before, so empty, and Lily, she's blossomed with you here. The way she talks about you, the way her face lights up when she's teaching you about the ranch, or showing you something she's learned. You've become important to her, to both of us." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning that neither of them was quite ready to examine. Then Lily stirred, whimpering, and the moment broke as they both turned their attention back to her. Dawn was just starting to lighten the sky when Clara noticed a change. Lily's breathing seemed easier, less labored. And when Clara touched her forehead, the skin felt cooler, not completely normal, but no longer burning. "Elijah," she whispered, "I think the fever's breaking." He reached over, his hand shaking slightly as he checked for himself. Relief crashed across his face like a wave. "Thank God," he breathed. "Thank God." They watched as Lily slipped into what looked like real sleep now, not the fever-tossed restlessness of before. The tension that had held them both rigid for hours began to ease, though neither of them moved from their positions flanking the child. "You should rest," Elijah said. "You've been up all night." "So have you." "I'll stay with her. You go upstairs, get some real sleep." But Clara found she couldn't move, couldn't bear to leave this room, to break the fragile bubble of relief and shared exhaustion. "I'll stay," she said. "Just a little longer." Elijah didn't argue. They sat together as the sun rose beyond the windows, washing the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Lily slept peacefully between them, her small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm that was the most beautiful sound Clara had ever heard. At some point, Clara must have dozed off, because she woke to find herself slumped in the chair with a blanket tucked around her shoulders. Across the room, Elijah was at the stove making coffee, moving quietly so as not to wake his daughter. Morning light streamed through the windows, bright and clean. Clara sat up slowly, her body stiff and aching. Lily was still asleep on the sofa, but her color looked better, and when Clara touched her forehead, the fever was definitely lower. "She's improving," Elijah said, bringing Clara a cup of coffee. "Temperature's almost normal. Mrs. Brennan said that was the crisis point. If she made it through the night, she'd be all right." "She made it," Clara said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "She's going to be fine." Something passed between them then, a look that held too much to name. Gratitude, yes. Relief. But something else too. Something that had been growing in the quiet moments, in the shared work and worry, in the way they'd moved around each other these past weeks, like dancers learning a new rhythm. "Clara," Elijah said, his voice low. "Last night, when I came back and saw you holding her, singing to her." He stopped, cleared his throat. "Sarah used to sing that lullaby. I haven't heard it in 3 years. And seeing you there, caring for Lily like she was your own, it made me realize something." Clara's heart was suddenly hammering. "What? You're not just helping us. You've become part of us. Part of this family. And I know that wasn't the arrangement. I know you're here temporarily, that you're planning to move on eventually. But I need you to know, I want you to know, that you have a place here, as long as you want it. The words should have been simple, practical, an extension of their existing arrangement. But the way he was looking at her, the raw honesty in his voice, made them something else entirely. Elijah, you don't have to say anything now, he interrupted gently. I just wanted you to know, after last night, after watching you fight for her like that, I needed you to know that you matter to us. Before Clara could respond, Lily stirred on the sofa, her eyes fluttering open. Papa? Her voice was hoarse but clear. Miss Clara? They both moved to her side immediately, and Elijah gathered his daughter into his arms, holding her carefully, as if she might break. I'm here, sweetheart. We're both here. I had funny dreams, Lily said, nestling against her father's chest, but I remember Miss Clara singing. That made the dreams better. Miss Clara took very good care of you, Elijah said, his voice thick with emotion. We both did. Lily looked at Clara over her father's shoulder, and her small hand reached out. Clara took it, holding tight, and felt tears slip down her cheeks, tears of relief, of exhaustion, of something deeper that she couldn't quite name. I knew you'd make me better, Lily said with the absolute certainty of children. You promised. The days that followed were quiet as Lily recovered her strength. Clara made nourishing broths and soft foods, read stories for hours, and hovered protectively even when Lily insisted she felt fine. Elijah watched them both with an expression Clara couldn't quite read, something warm and complicated that made her heart skip when she caught him looking. They didn't speak again about what he'd said that morning, but something had shifted between them, subtle as the change from winter to spring, but just as inevitable. Clara noticed the way his hand would brush hers when passing dishes at supper, the way his eyes followed her as she moved through the house, the way he smiled now, rare but genuine, transforming his whole face. And she noticed her own reactions too. The flutter in her stomach when he came in from outside, his cheeks reddened from cold, the way her breath caught when he stood close, the warmth that bloomed in her chest when he praised something she'd done, a meal particularly well made, a mending job expertly finished. This wasn't what she'd come west for, wasn't what she'd expected or planned. But standing at the kitchen window one afternoon, watching Elijah teach Lily to feed the chickens, seeing them laugh together in the weak spring sunlight, Clara felt something dangerous taking root in her heart. She was happy here, not the frantic, hopeful happiness she'd felt planning her wedding to Levi. This was quieter, steadier, the kind of happiness that came from belonging, from being needed, from days filled with meaningful work and genuine affection. She was falling in love with this life, with this little girl who'd stolen her heart completely. And, though it terrified her to even think it, with the man who'd offered her shelter when she had nothing, who'd trusted her with his most precious treasure, who looked at her sometimes like she was something miraculous instead of just a woman who'd been abandoned at a train station. That night, after Lily was asleep and they sat together by the fire, as had become their habit, Clara gathered her courage. Elijah, what you said the other morning about me having a place here. He looked up from the harness he was mending, his hands stilling. Yes? Did you mean it? Or were you just, caught up in the fear and relief? I meant it. His voice was steady, certain. Every word. I need you to understand something. Well, Clara set down her sewing, meeting his eyes directly. When I came here, I thought I knew what I wanted. A husband, a home, a tidy future, all planned out. But Levi, what he did, it made me realize I'd been trying to force something that wasn't real. I was so desperate to belong somewhere that I convinced myself those letters meant more than they did. You don't have to explain. I do. Because what's happening here, it's real. And that terrifies me more than anything, because I've felt loss before, and I don't know if I could survive it again. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I'm afraid to let myself care too much, to hope too much. Because what if... Elijah set aside his work and crossed to where she sat. He knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. What if what? What if this is temporary too? What if I wake up one day and you've decided you don't need me anymore? Or what if something happens? She couldn't finish the thought, couldn't voice the fear that loss would find her here too. Clara. His thumbs rubbed gentle circles on the backs of her hands. I can't promise you that nothing bad will ever happen. Life's too uncertain for that. But I can promise you this. As long as I have breath in my body, you will have a home here. You will have family. You will matter. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks, and she didn't try to stop them. I don't want to just be useful. I don't want to just be the woman who helps with Lily and keeps house. I want... She stopped, afraid to speak the truth. What do you want? His voice was gentle, coaxing. I want this to be real, she whispered. I want to belong here. Not because you need help, but because you want me here. Because I matter not just for what I do, but for who I am. Elijah's hands tightened on hers. You think I don't see who you are? Clara, I see you. I see your strength and your kindness. I see the way you love my daughter like she's your own. I see how hard you work, how you've taken a house that was just surviving and made it feel like a home again. He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. And I see a woman a woman who makes me think about futures again instead of just getting through each day. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility and promise. Clara's heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. If I stay, she said carefully, it can't be as your employee anymore. That arrangement, it doesn't fit what this has become. No, Elijah agreed, it doesn't. So what would I be? What would we be? He stood slowly, drawing her up with him so they stood facing each other in the firelight. I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out, if you're willing. Clara looked up at him, this man who'd saved her from the snow, who'd given her shelter and purpose, who'd become so much more than a stranger offering kindness. She thought about the life she'd planned with Levi, built on letters and hope and nothing substantial. And she thought about the life that was building here, brick by brick, day by day, in shared meals and worried nights and small moments of joy. I'm willing, she whispered. Elijah's smile was slow and genuine, transforming his whole face. He raised one hand, hesitating just a moment before tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was feather light, but it sent warmth flooding through Clara's entire body. We'll take it slow, he said. No rushing, no false promises, just seeing where this goes. Yes, Clara agreed. Slow is good. They stood there for a moment longer, the fire crackling beside them, the house quiet around them. Then Elijah stepped back, and the spell broke gently, leaving behind only warmth and possibility. That night, Clara climbed the stairs to her small room with her heart lighter than it had been in months, maybe years. She'd come west looking for one kind of love, the romantic, letter-written kind that promised happily ever after. Instead, she'd found something different, something real and growing, built on shared work and genuine care, on crisis weathered together and quiet moments of understanding. She'd found a little girl who needed a mother, a man who needed, what? A partner, a companion, someone to help carry the weight of life on the frontier, and maybe, eventually, something more. As Clara changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, she thought about promises, about the ones that had been broken and the ones being carefully, tentatively made, about how the life you planned sometimes wasn't nearly as good as the life that found you when you weren't looking. Outside, the first hints of spring were beginning to show through the snow. And inside, in this house that had felt like a way station, Clara was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally come home. Spring arrived slowly in Montana, as if testing the ground before committing fully to the change. The snow began to recede from the fields, revealing brown earth that would soon turn green. Icicles dripped from the eaves in the afternoons, creating a steady percussion that marked the passing hours. And inside the Carter ranch house, something else was thawing too. Something neither Clara nor Elijah spoke about directly, but that colored every interaction with a new warmth. The weeks after their conversation by the fire brought a subtle shift in their daily rhythm. Elijah found more reasons to be in the house during the day, teaching Clara about the ranch operations, showing her how to read the weather signs, explaining his plans for spring planting. Clara caught herself taking extra care with her appearance, pinning her hair more carefully, choosing Sarah's dresses that fit better and made her feel pretty rather than just practical. And Lily, with the uncanny perception of children, noticed everything. Papa smiles more now, she announced one morning at breakfast, her tone matter-of-fact as she spread jam on her bread. He used to hardly ever smile, but now he smiles lots, especially when Miss Clara makes jokes. Clara felt her cheeks heat. I don't make that many jokes. You do, though, Lily insisted, like yesterday when you said the rooster was conducting a symphony for an audience of hens. That was funny, and Papa laughed. Elijah cleared his throat, suddenly very interested in his coffee. Eat your breakfast, Lily. I am eating. I'm just also noticing things. Lily took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, then added, Mrs. Henderson at the Mercantile said you two make a handsome couple. I heard her tell Mrs. Brennan. Now both adults were uncomfortable. Clara set down her fork carefully. Lily, it's not polite to repeat conversations you overhear. But she said it nice. She said it was about time Papa had some happiness again, and that you were good for him, and that, Lily, Elijah's voice was gentle but firm. That's enough. The little girl subsided, but her knowing smile suggested she understood far more than they were comfortable with. Clara and Elijah exchanged a glance across the table. Part embarrassment, part amusement, part something else that made Clara's pulse quicken. The town was indeed talking. Clara had ventured into Silver Ridge twice more since that first terrible day, and each time she'd felt the weight of curious stares and whispered conversations. But to her surprise, the gossip wasn't entirely unkind. Some people clearly disapproved of the arrangement, a single woman living with a widower, regardless of a child's presence. But others seemed to view it as practical frontier sense, or even romantic in its own way. Levi Ransom's a fool, Mrs. Henderson had said during Clara's last visit, loud enough for several customers to hear. Throwing over a good woman like you for that simpering Sullivan girl. Mark my words, he'll regret it, and Elijah Carter's getting the better end of that deal. Clara hadn't known how to respond, so she just smiled and completed her purchases as quickly as possible. But the words had warmed something inside her. She wasn't just the abandoned mail-order bride anymore. She was becoming someone in her own right, Clara Hawthorne, who kept house for the Carters and was teaching little Lily to sew, who made bread that Mrs. Brennan said was the best she'd tasted, who belonged. But belonging came with complications she hadn't anticipated. It was a mild afternoon in late March when those complications arrived on horseback. Clara was in the garden, examining the soil and planning where to plant vegetables once the danger of frost passed, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She looked up to see a man riding toward the house. Tall and lean, with sandy hair and an easy posture in the saddle that suggested confidence bordering on arrogance. Something about him made Clara's stomach tighten with apprehension. He dismounted near the porch, tying his horse to the rail, and turned to face her. His eyes swept over her with an assessment that felt uncomfortably familiar, though Clara couldn't place why. Then he smiled, and recognition hit her like a blow. The photograph. Levi's photograph. You must be Clara Hawthorne, he said, his voice smooth and practiced. I'm Levi Ransom. I believe we have some unfinished business to discuss. Clara's hands clenched into fists at her sides. For a moment she couldn't find her voice. Could only stare at this man who'd promised her everything and then married someone else, who'd brought her 1,500 miles only to abandon her, who looked at her now with something like proprietary interest. We have nothing to discuss, she finally managed, her voice cold. You made your choices clear. Now, Clara, don't be like that. He took a step closer, and she took one back. I know you must have been surprised when you arrived and I wasn't there. But if you'll just let me explain. Explain! The word came out sharp as broken glass. Explain how you sent for me 3 weeks after deciding to marry someone else? Explain how you left me standing on that platform with nowhere to go? What possible explanation could make that acceptable? Levi had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Mary, Miss Sullivan, her father owns the bank. He made me an offer I couldn't refuse. A partnership, financial backing for the ranch expansion I'd been planning. But the condition was that I marry Mary. He spread his hands as if this made everything reasonable. You have to understand, Clara, it was business, nothing personal. Nothing personal? Clara's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. You asked me to uproot my entire life, to travel across the country, to marry you, and it was nothing personal? I know it seems harsh when you put it that way, but how else would I put it? Clara was shaking now, with anger she hadn't let herself fully feel until this moment. You used me. Strung me along with letters and promises while you negotiated a better deal. Do you have any idea what that day was like? Standing there in my wedding dress, realizing I'd given up everything for a man who'd never intended to keep his word? I'm sorry about that, Levi said, though his tone suggested the apology was perfunctory at best. Truly, but that's actually why I'm here. You see, things have changed. Something in his voice made Clara's anger shift to wariness. What do you mean? The marriage to Mary. It didn't work out. She was too spoiled, too demanding. Wanted a townhouse and servants and things I couldn't provide on a rancher's income. Her father's withdrawn his financial support, and Mary's filed for an annulment. He smiled, as if this news should please her. So you see, the position is open again. We could still get married, just like we planned. Clara stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. You think I would marry you? After everything? Why not? You came all this way for that purpose. And let's be honest, Clara, what are your other options? You're living here as a charity case, aren't you? Playing house for Elijah Carter, taking care of his brat. Don't. The word cracked like a whip. Don't you dare speak about Lily that way. Levi's eyes narrowed, and Clara saw calculation there. So that's how it is. You've set your sights on the widower. Tell me, Clara, does he know you were supposed to marry me? Does he know you're just another desperate woman looking for any man who'll have her? That's enough. Elijah's voice cut through the air like a blade. Clara spun to see him standing on the porch, and from his expression, he'd heard at least part of the conversation. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes blazed with cold fury. Carter, Levi said, his tone shifting to something falsely friendly. I didn't know you were home. I was just catching up with my fiancée here. She's not your fiancée. Elijah descended the steps slowly, each movement deliberate and controlled. She never was, from what I understand. Just a woman you lied to and abandoned. That's between me and Clara, but no. Elijah stopped a few feet away, and though he didn't raise his voice, the threat in it was unmistakable. You're on my property, insulting a woman under my protection. That makes it my business. Levi's easy smile faltered. Look, I don't want trouble. I just came to make things right with Clara. To offer her what I originally promised. What you originally promised? Clara found her voice again, stepping forward to stand beside Elijah. You promised honesty and respect and a partnership. You delivered lies and betrayal and humiliation. Why on earth would I accept anything from you now? Because you don't have anything else. Levi's veneer of civility was cracking now, revealing the desperation underneath. You think Carter's going to marry you? A woman who came west to marry another man? He's just using you for cheap labor and company. Once he's done with you, you'll be right back where you started, alone with nothing. Get off my land. Elijah's voice was deadly quiet. Now. I'm not leaving without Clara. She came here for me, and she owes me the courtesy of... She owes you nothing. Elijah took another step forward, and Levi actually backed up. You owe her an apology and probably a lot more besides. But since I doubt you have the character to give either, I'll settle for you getting on your horse and riding away. And if I ever see you near her again, if I hear you've spoken to her or about her, you'll regret it. For a moment, it looked like Levi might argue. Then he glanced between Elijah's implacable expression and Clara's angry one, and apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor. Fine, he spat. Have her. But don't say I didn't warn you, Carter. She's damaged goods. A mail-order bride nobody wanted. Elijah moved then, faster than Clara would have thought possible. He grabbed Levi by his coat front and hauled him close, his voice dropping to a growl that made Clara's skin prickle. Listen very carefully. If you ever speak about her that way again, I will make you regret every word. Clara Hawthorne is worth 100 of you. She's got more courage and kindness in her little finger than you have in your whole worthless hide. Now get out of my sight before I forget I'm a civilized man. He released Levi with a shove that sent the other man stumbling backward. Levi caught himself, his face flushed with anger and humiliation, but he didn't dare respond. Instead, he strode to his horse, mounted with jerky movements, and yanked the reins around. You'll regret this, Carter, he called back. Both of you will. Then he was gone, spurring his horse into a gallop and disappearing down the road in a cloud of dust. The silence he left behind was deafening. Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding, her mind reeling from the confrontation. Elijah remained where he was, breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Are you all right?" His voice was rough when he finally spoke. Yes, thank you for what you said, for defending me. I meant every word." Elijah turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made Clara's breath catch. "Every word, Clara. You're not damaged. You're not desperate. You're brave and strong and—" He stopped, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm sorry he came here. Sorry he said those things to you. It's not your fault." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the mild afternoon. I can't believe he thought I'd actually consider marrying him after everything, like I'd be so grateful for any offer that I'd overlook the betrayal." "Some men think women don't have any pride," Elijah said grimly, "that they'll accept any scraps thrown their way. Ransom's a fool." "He said—" Clara hesitated, then pushed forward. "He said you were just using me. That once you were done, I'd be alone again." Elijah's expression darkened. "And do you believe that?" "No." The answer came immediately, from her heart rather than her head. "No, I don't. But he's right about one thing. People will talk, are already talking, about me living here, about what it means, about—" "Let them talk." Elijah closed the distance between them, and Clara found herself looking up into his face, seeing things there that made her pulse race. "I don't give a damn what people say. The only thing that matters is what's true. And the truth is, you've become essential to me, to both of us, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Elijah, I know we said we'd take things slow, and we will, but after that, after hearing him talk about you that way, I need you to know, you're not temporary, you're not convenient, you're—" He reached up, cupping her face with one calloused hand. "You're home, Clara, for me and for Lily. And if you'll let me, I'd like to make that official." Clara's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying marry me, not because it's convenient or practical, though it is both those things. Not because people are talking or because it'll make things easier, though it would. Marry me because—" He stopped, took a breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was raw with honesty. "Because I'm falling in love with you. Because I can't imagine this house without you in it. Because Lily needs you and I need you, and I want to give you what Ransom never could, a real home, a real family, a real partnership." Clara felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "You don't have to. I mean, just because Levi showed up doesn't mean—" "This has nothing to do with him." Elijah's thumb brushed away her tears. "I've been thinking about this for weeks. Since the night Lily got sick and I watched you fight for her like she was your own. Since all the mornings I wake up thinking about coming back to the house because you're in it. Since every evening when I see you reading with her or cooking or just sitting by the fire and I think about how empty my life was before you stumbled into it." "I didn't stumble," Clara said through her tears, a watery laugh escaping. "You offered me your coat and brought me home." "Best decision I ever made." Elijah smiled, soft and genuine. "So what do you say? Will you stay? Not as an employee or a guest, but as my wife?" Clara thought about the life she'd imagined with Levi, built on letters and fantasies and desperate hope. And she thought about the life that had built itself here, day by day, in shared work and quiet moments and genuine affection. She thought about Lily's bright laughter and Elijah's steady presence, and the way this house had become more of a home in 3 months than anywhere she'd lived in her entire life. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Elijah's smile was like sunrise, slow and transforming and beautiful. He pulled her into his arms, and Clara went willingly, burying her face in his chest and feeling his heart beating steady and strong beneath her cheek. His arms came around her solid and warm, and for the first time since that terrible day on the train platform, Clara felt truly safe. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the spring afternoon, while the world settled into its new shape around them. Then a small voice called from the house. "Papa, Miss Clara, why are you hugging?" They broke apart to find Lily standing in the doorway, her head tilted curiously. Clara laughed, wiping her eyes, and Elijah cleared his throat. Come here, sweetheart, he said, holding out his hand. We have something to tell you. Lily bounded down the steps and looked between them expectantly. What? What is it? Elijah glanced at Clara, who nodded encouragingly. He knelt down to Lily's level. How would you feel about Miss Clara becoming part of our family? Permanently? Lily's eyes went wide. You mean she'd stay forever? And be my mama? If she's willing, Elijah said. I've asked her to marry me, and she said yes. For a moment, Lily just stared. Then she let out a shriek of pure joy and launched herself at Clara, who caught her and held tight as the little girl wrapped her arms around her neck. You're going to be my mama, my real mama. I knew it. I knew Papa would ask. I told Mrs. Brennan he would, and she said I was just hopeful, but I knew. The words tumbled out in a rush of excitement. Clara looked over Lily's head at Elijah and found him watching them with such tenderness that her heart ached with it. This man who'd been a stranger 4 months ago, this child who'd stolen her heart completely, this life that had found her when she wasn't looking. So when's the wedding? Lily demanded, pulling back to look at Clara's face. Can I be in it? Can I wear a pretty dress? Will there be cake? We'll figure all that out, Clara promised. But yes, you can definitely be in it. And will you make my dress? Like you made your princess dress? The mention of the wedding dress, still hanging in Clara's room, stained and ruined, brought a pang. But then Clara looked at the joy on Lily's face, at the love in Elijah's eyes, and realized that old dress didn't matter anymore. That life, that hope, that version of herself who'd worn it, all of that belonged to the past. This was her present, her future, and it was more real and solid than any fantasy built on letters could ever be. I'll make you the most beautiful dress you've ever seen, Clara promised. That evening, after Lily had finally been convinced to go to bed, though she was far too excited to sleep, Clara and Elijah sat together by the fire. There were practical details to discuss, plans to be made, but for now, they just sat in comfortable silence, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. I should probably tell you something, Clara said eventually, about Levi's visit. What about it? He was right about one thing. People will talk even more now about how quickly this happened, about the timing. Some will say, I was just looking for any husband, and you were convenient. Let them say what they want. Elijah's voice was unconcerned. Anyone who knows us will know the truth, and anyone who doesn't know us, their opinion doesn't matter. And the truth is? The truth is I was dead inside for 3 years, going through the motions, taking care of Lily, managing the ranch, but not really living. Then you showed up in a wedding dress in the middle of a snowstorm, and slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it happening, you brought me back to life. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. That's the truth. Everything else is just noise. Clara tilted her head up to look at him. I was so angry at Levi, so hurt. But if he'd actually married me that day, if everything had gone according to plan, I would have missed this. Missed you and Lily and this life we're building. So maybe it all happened exactly the way it was supposed to. Maybe it did. Elijah's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. I don't believe in fate or destiny, but I believe in second chances. And I believe in not wasting them when they come. Then he leaned down and kissed her, soft and gentle and full of promise. Clara's eyes fluttered closed as she kissed him back, feeling something slot into place deep in her chest. This was what she'd been searching for. Not romance or grand gestures, but this, genuine affection built on respect and shared experience, on choosing each other day after day, on love that grew from the ground up rather than being imposed from above. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing a little harder, Elijah rested his forehead against hers. We should set a date, he said, before the spring planting gets too intense. How soon? As soon as you want. Tomorrow, if you're willing. Clara laughed softly. Maybe give me a little more time than that. I'd like to make a proper dress, and Lily will want to help plan. 2 weeks then? 2 weeks, Clara agreed, feeling a flutter of nerves and excitement in her stomach. That gives us time to post bands, let people know, make arrangements. And gives you time to be sure, Elijah added quietly. I don't want you to feel rushed. If you need more time, I don't. Clara took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That night, Clara lay in bed thinking about the strange turns life could take. 4 months ago, she'd been preparing to marry a man she'd never met, traveling toward a future built on letters and hope. She'd thought she knew what she wanted, what she needed to be happy. She'd been so wrong. What she'd needed wasn't a fantasy or a rescue. It was this, a real place with real people who knew her flaws and chose her anyway. A child who needed her and a man who saw her value not for what she could provide but for who she was. Work that mattered, and days filled with purpose and the quiet satisfaction of building something lasting. She thought about the wedding dress hanging in her room and decided it was time to put it away. Not because she was ashamed of it or wanted to forget, but because it belonged to a different person. The Clara who'd believed in letter-perfect love and fairy tale endings. The Clara had died on the train platform in the snow. This Clara, the one who'd learned to make bread and care for chickens, who'd sat up all night with a feverish child, who'd found courage she didn't know she had. This Clara deserved a new dress, one made with joy instead of desperate hope, one created for a marriage that was real and solid and built on truth. Tomorrow, she would start working on it, would choose fabric the color of spring sky, would embroider it with flowers that actually grew in Montana, would make it a celebration of the life she'd found rather than the one she'd lost. But tonight, she just let herself feel grateful. Grateful for the snow that had nearly killed her but had led her here. Grateful for Elijah's kindness and Lily's open heart. Grateful for second chances and new beginnings and the unexpected ways that home could find you when you'd given up looking for it. Outside, the last of winter's snow was melting, feeding the earth, preparing it for growth. And inside, Clara was doing the same, letting go of what had frozen her, opening herself to new life, trusting that spring would come after all. The 2 weeks that followed Elijah's proposal should have been filled with nothing but joy and preparation. And they were, mostly. Clara spent her days working on her new wedding dress, pale blue fabric that reminded her of Montana's endless sky, embroidered with delicate wildflowers that Lily helped her identify from a nature book. The little girl was constantly underfoot, asking questions, offering suggestions, practically vibrating with excitement about the wedding. But beneath the happiness ran an undercurrent of unease that Clara couldn't quite shake. It started small, a sense of being watched when she went into town for supplies. The feeling of eyes on her back as she selected ribbon and thread from Mrs. Henderson's mercantile. Conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered a room, then resumed in whispers after she passed. "People are just curious," Mrs. Henderson assured her when Clara commented on it. "Weddings got everyone talking. Don't pay them any mind, dear." But it felt like more than curiosity. It felt like anticipation, as if the town was waiting for something to happen. Clara tried to dismiss her concerns, tried to focus on the joy of planning a life with Elijah and Lily. But the unease persisted, a shadow at the edge of her happiness. It was Lily who first voiced what Clara had been trying not to think about. "Miss Clara," the little girl said one evening as they sat together sewing, "what if Mr. Ransom comes back?" Clara's needle stilled. "Why would he come back, sweetheart?" "I heard Mrs. Brennan talking to Papa. She said Mr. Ransom's been telling people you're still promised to him, that you can't marry Papa because you already agreed to marry him." Lily's small face was troubled. "That's not true, is it? You don't have to marry him, do you?" A cold feeling settled in Clara's stomach. "No, darling, I don't have to marry him. Those promises, they stopped being real the moment he married someone else." But even as she said it, Clara wondered. She'd never formally broken their engagement because there had never been a formal engagement, just letters and an understanding. Could Levi actually make trouble for them? Would he dare? That night, after Lily was in bed, Clara mentioned the conversation to Elijah. His expression grew dark. "I've heard the same rumors," he admitted. "Ransom's been in town, drinking at the saloon, telling anyone who'll listen that you're his intended bride and I'm stealing you from him." "That's ridiculous. He married Mary Sullivan." "Annulment was granted last week. According to the gossip, he's claiming that since his marriage to Mary is legally void, his promises to you stand." Elijah's jaw clenched. "It's nonsense, of course. No judge would uphold such a claim, but he's stirring up trouble regardless." "Why?" Clara asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Why would he do this? He doesn't want me. He made that clear. So why won't he just let this go? Pride, Elijah said grimly, and spite. You rejected him, and I threw him off my land. Some men can't stomach that kind of humiliation. Clara felt anger rising in her chest. So he'll try to ruin both our reputations out of petty revenge? He'll try, but he won't succeed. Elijah took her hands, his grip firm and reassuring. Clara, look at me. Nothing Levi Ransom says or does can change what we have. We're getting married in 10 days, and after that no one can question your place here. You'll be my wife, Lily's mother, part of this family, legally, and in every other way that matters. Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love and right would triumph over spite and lies. But she'd learned the hard way that the world didn't always work that way. The next few days were tense. Clara ventured into town only when absolutely necessary, and each time she felt the weight of stares and whispers following her. Some people were supportive, Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Brennan, the Reverend, and his wife. But others looked at her with judgment or suspicion, as if Levi's lies had planted seeds of doubt about her character. It was exactly 1 week before the wedding when everything came to a head. Clara was alone at the house. Elijah had taken Lily with him to check on the cattle in the far pasture when she heard a horse approaching. She looked out the window and felt her stomach drop. Levi Ransom riding up to the house with an expression of grim determination. Every instinct screamed at her to lock the door and refuse to speak to him. But Clara had spent too many weeks finding her courage to hide now. She stepped onto the porch, standing tall despite the fear making her hands shake. You're not welcome here, she said as Levi dismounted. Elijah made that clear. Carter's not here, though, is he? Levi smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Just you and me, Clara. Time we had an honest conversation. We have nothing to talk about. I think we do. He climbed the porch steps, and Clara held her ground even though she wanted to back away. See, I've been thinking about our situation, about how you traveled all this way to marry me, how we had an agreement you broke when you married someone else. That marriage is void. Legally, it never existed, which means my promises to you still stand. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. I've been talking to a lawyer. Turns out our correspondence could be considered a binding contract. You accepted my proposal in writing, agreed to travel here to become my wife. That's a legal commitment, Clara. Clara's mouth went dry. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. If you marry Carter next week, you'll be in breach of contract. I could sue you for damages. Could sue Carter for alienation of affections. Make this very expensive and very public for both of you. He tucked the paper away, his expression smug. Or we could resolve this quietly. You marry me like you originally agreed and everyone goes home happy. Happy? Clara's voice rose. You think I could be happy married to a man who's blackmailing me? Who betrayed me and is now trying to force me into marriage through threats? I'm offering you a way out of a scandal, a way to save Carter's reputation and yours. Seems like a generous offer to me. It's not generous, it's cruel and manipulative, and Clara stopped, forcing herself to breathe, to think. Why are you doing this? You don't love me. You don't even want me. So why? For a moment, something flickered across Levi's face, something ugly and bitter. You want the truth? Fine. After Mary left, after her father pulled his money and everyone in town knew I'd been rejected, I became a joke. The man who got himself an annulment before the marriage bed was even cold. The man who threw over his mail-order bride for a banker's daughter and got nothing for it. His voice hardened. Then I heard you'd landed on your feet, found yourself a better situation with Carter, and people started saying I was a fool for letting you go, that you'd gotten the better end of the deal. So this is about pride, Clara said quietly. You can't stand that I'm happy without you. This is about what's mine, Levi snapped. You came here for me, made promises to me, and I'm holding you to them. No. The word came out strong and clear. No, Levi, I'm not yours. I never was. Those letters, they were written to someone I thought existed, a kind man who wanted a partner and a family. But that man was never real, was he? You were just shopping for a wife the way you'd shop for livestock, looking for the best deal. That's how marriage works on the frontier, sweetheart. Don't pretend you didn't know that. Maybe for some people, but not for me. Not anymore. Clara straightened her shoulders. You can threaten all you want. You can wave your lawyer's paper and try to intimidate me, but I won't marry you. Not now. Not ever. And if you try to sue Elijah or drag us through the courts, you'll lose, because everyone in this territory will know exactly what kind of man you are. Levi's face flushed with anger. You're making a mistake. I'm giving you one last chance to do this the easy way. She said no. Both of them turned to see Elijah standing at the edge of the porch, Lily beside him. Clara's heart leapt with relief and fear. Relief that he was here, fear of what might happen next. Elijah's expression was thunderous, and he held his rifle loosely in one hand. How long have you been standing there? Levi demanded. Long enough. Elijah handed the rifle to Lily with a quiet instruction to take it inside, and the little girl obeyed, her eyes wide and frightened. Then he climbed the porch steps, placing himself between Clara and Levi. You're going to get on your horse and ride away, and you're never coming back here. Or what? You'll shoot me? Levi laughed harshly. That would solve your problems, wouldn't it? But you're not that kind of man, Carter. Too honorable. Too decent. You're right. I won't shoot you. Elijah's voice was quiet and all the more dangerous for it. But I will beat you until you can't ride. Then I'll tie you to your horse and send it toward town with a note explaining exactly what you tried to do here today. Let the whole territory know that Levi Ransom tried to blackmail a woman into marriage. She's legally promised to me. No lawyer in Montana would uphold that claim, and you know it. You're bluffing, hoping she's too scared or too ignorant to call you on it. Elijah took a step forward. But here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to leave. And if I hear you've spoken Clara's name again, if I hear you've spread one more lie or made one more threat, I'll make sure every person in this territory knows the truth about you. About how you abandoned your mail-order bride, how you married for money and got annulled, how you tried to force a woman to marry you through intimidation. Your reputation will be destroyed. No decent woman will ever consider you. No business will deal with you. You'll be finished. Levi's face had gone from red to pale. You can't do that. Watch me. Elijah's voice was steel. I have friends in this territory, people who respect me, people who will believe me over you any day. So you have a choice. Leave now with whatever scraps of dignity you have left, or stay and find out just how much damage I can do to your future. For a long moment, Levi stood frozen, rage and fear warring in his expression. Then he looked past Elijah to Clara, and something cruel twisted his features. You'll regret this, he said. Both of you. He's only marrying you out of pity, Clara, because you're convenient. Once the novelty wears off, once you stop being useful, he'll discard you just like I did. The words hit their mark, and Clara felt them lodge in her chest like barbs. But before she could respond, Elijah moved. He grabbed Levi by the front of his shirt and hauled him close, his voice dropping to a growl. Listen very carefully. Clara is the best thing that's happened to this family in 3 years. She's brave and strong and kind, and she's worth 10 of you on your best day. I'm not marrying her out of pity or convenience. I'm marrying her because I love her, because I can't imagine my life without her in it, because she makes me want to be better than I am. He shoved Levi backward. Now get off my land before I forget every principle I've ever held and beat you bloody right here. Levi stumbled, caught himself, and for a moment Clara thought he might actually be stupid enough to throw a punch. But something in Elijah's eyes must have convinced him otherwise. He backed down the steps, his hands raised in mock surrender. Fine. Have her. You deserve each other. 2 charity cases making the best of a bad situation. He mounted his horse, jerking the reins hard enough to make the animal toss its head. But don't say I didn't warn you when this all falls apart. Then he was gone, spurring his horse into a gallop and disappearing down the road. Clara watched until the dust settled, then felt her legs give out. She sank onto the porch step, shaking violently. Elijah was beside her immediately, his arm around her shoulders, his voice gentle. It's over. He's gone. He won't be back. What if he tries to make good on his threats? Clara whispered. What if he really does have a lawyer, really does try to sue us? Then we'll fight it, and we'll win. Elijah turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. Clara, Look at me. Do you really think any judge would force you to marry a man who abandoned you? Who's now trying to blackmail you? It's an empty threat. He knows it. He just hoped we wouldn't. But what he said about you marrying me out of pity was a desperate man's attempt to hurt you, to make you doubt what we have. Elijah's thumb brushed her cheek. Do you doubt it? Do you really think I'm that good an actor, that I've been pretending these past months? Clara thought about the quiet evenings by the fire, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the tenderness in his voice when he spoke about their future. No, she whispered. No, I don't think you're pretending. Then don't let his poison work. Don't let him take this from us. Elijah pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, Clara Hawthorne, not because you're convenient or useful, but because you're you. Because you make me laugh. Because you're patient with my daughter and brave enough to build a life from nothing. Because when I look at you, I see home. The tears that had been threatening finally fell, but they were good tears, cleansing tears that washed away the last of Levi's venom. Clara wrapped her arms around Elijah's neck and held on tight, feeling his heart beating steady against hers. I love you too, she whispered. So much. I was just so scared. I know, but you don't have to be scared anymore. We're in this together. The sound of the door opening made them pull apart. Lily stood there, still holding the rifle, carefully pointed down like her father had taught her, her small face worried. Is the bad man gone? She asked. He's gone, sweetheart. Elijah held out his arm and Lily came running, settling into the space between them. And he's not coming back. Good. Lily looked up at Clara with fierce determination. Because you're going to be my mama, and nobody gets to take that away. Not Mr. Ransom or anybody. Clara's heart swelled so large she thought it might burst. She pulled Lily close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Nothing's taking that away, I promise. They sat there together on the porch steps, this family that had formed itself through circumstance and grown through choice, and let the afternoon sun warm them. The crisis had passed, the threat was gone, and in its wake, their commitment to each other felt stronger than ever. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Claire and Elijah made plans. They would move the wedding up to 3 days from now instead of waiting the full week. The Reverend would understand, and their closest friends would come on short notice. It wasn't about rushing or fear anymore. It was about claiming their future now, rather than letting Levi's shadow hang over them any longer. I want to be your wife, Clara said simply. Not in a week, not in 3 days really, but I'll take what I can get. I want it official. I want no one to ever question my place here again. Then that's what we'll do. Elijah kissed her softly. 3 days. Think you can have your dress finished? It's already done. Has been for 2 days. I was just adding extra embroidery to pass the time. He smiled. Then there's nothing standing in our way. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Word spread quickly about the moved-up wedding date, and instead of the scandal Clara feared, the response was overwhelmingly supportive. It seemed Levi's behavior in town, his drinking and his bitter complaints, had turned public opinion against him. People who might have believed his lies about contracts and broken promises now saw him for what he was, a man who couldn't accept rejection gracefully. Mrs. Henderson closed the mercantile early on wedding day to help Clara prepare. Mrs. Brennan brought flowers from her greenhouse, early crocuses and snowdrops, the first brave blooms of spring. Even women Clara barely knew stopped by with small gifts, a jar of preserves, an embroidered handkerchief, a carefully wrapped bar of lavender soap. You've become one of us, Mrs. Henderson said as she helped Clara into her dress. That's what all this means. You're not the abandoned mail-order bride anymore. You're Clara Carter-to-be, Elijah's bride, Lily's mother. You're home. Standing in front of the mirror in her new dress, blue as the sky, embroidered with wildflowers, made with joy instead of desperation, Clara barely recognized herself. The frightened, heartbroken woman who'd sat on that train platform was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, surer, someone who'd learned that the life you built was worth more than the life you planned. The wedding was small, held in the church with only close friends present. Lily stood beside Clara in her new dress, pink gingham that Clara had sewn, decorated with ribbons that Lily had chosen herself. The little girl held a small bouquet and vibrated with barely contained excitement throughout the brief ceremony. When the Reverend asked if anyone had objections to the marriage, Clara's heart stopped for one terrible moment. But the church remained silent, and Elijah squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I do," Elijah said, when asked if he took Clara as his wife. And the certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. "I do," Clara echoed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, when Elijah pulled her close and kissed her in front of God and the congregation, Clara felt something settle deep in her soul. This was real. This was forever. This was home. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. Neighbors brought food to share, and tables were set up outside the church to take advantage of the mild spring afternoon. Lily ran between groups of adults, proudly telling anyone who'd listen that Miss Clara was her mama now, really and truly. Clara found herself surrounded by women offering advice and welcome, men shaking Elijah's hand and clapping him on the back, children playing games in the churchyard. This was community. This was belonging. Everything she'd hoped for when she left Philadelphia, delivered in a way she never could have imagined. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Elijah found Clara standing slightly apart from the crowd, watching the celebration with a soft smile. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "Not even for a moment." Clara leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "I was just thinking about that day on the train platform, how lost I felt, how certain I was that my life was over. And now? Now I know it was just beginning." She turned in his arms to face him. "I thought I knew what I wanted, a tidy future all planned out, a husband who'd rescue me from my lonely life. But what I needed was this, was you and Lily, was learning that I didn't need rescuing, I just needed a place to land so I could save myself." Elijah's smile was tender. "You saved more than yourself. You saved us, too. This house was a tomb before you came. We were just going through the motions, surviving but not living. You brought us back to life, Clara. You made us a family again." Across the yard, Lily shrieked with laughter as she chased another child, her braids flying behind her, her face bright with joy. Clara watched her daughter now, legally and in every way that mattered, and felt her heart overflow. "Thank you," she whispered to Elijah, "for stopping that day, for offering me your coat, for bringing me home. Thank you for staying." He kissed her forehead gently. "For choosing us." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the celebration wound down. Friends departed with warm wishes and promises to visit soon. Elijah, Clara, and Lily rode home together in the wagon, Lily nestled between them, half asleep and full of cake. The ranch house appeared in the twilight, lamplight glowing in the windows, smoke rising from the chimney. It looked exactly as it had the first time Clara had seen it, yet completely different. Then it had been shelter, a temporary haven. Now it was home. After Lily was tucked into bed, a process that took longer than usual because she kept thinking of one more thing she needed to tell her new mama, Clara and Elijah stood together in the kitchen, suddenly shy with each other now that they were alone as husband and wife. Clara started. "Would you like," Elijah said at the same time. They both stopped, laughed nervously. Then Elijah reached for her hand. "Come with me," he said softly. "There's something I want to show you." He led her upstairs, past Lily's room and Clara's small bedroom, to the door at the end of the hall. His room, their room now, Clara realized with a flutter in her stomach. He opened the door and ushered her inside. The room was larger than she'd imagined, with a big bed covered in a simple quilt, a dresser, a washstand. But what caught her attention was what sat on the dresser, a silver-framed photograph of a woman. Sarah. Clara's steps faltered. She'd known, of course, that Sarah had existed, that Elijah had loved her, that this room had been theirs. But seeing the photograph there felt like confirmation that maybe there wasn't room for her in this space after all. Elijah must have sensed her hesitation because he moved to the dresser and picked up the photograph, studying it for a long moment. "Sarah was a good woman," he said quietly, "kind and gentle. She gave me Lily, gave me 3 good years. I'll always be grateful for that. He looked at Clara, then his eyes clear and certain. But she's gone, and I'm not. You're not. And this life we're building, it's not a replacement for what I had. It's something new, something different, something ours. He opened the dresser drawer and placed the photograph inside, not hiding it but putting it away. Then he turned back to Clara. I loved Sarah, but I love you too, Clara. Differently, maybe, but no less real. And I need you to know that you're not living in her shadow. You're standing in your own light. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears. Understanding tears. She crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid I'd always be the second choice, the convenient replacement. But I'm not, am I? No. Elijah pulled her close. You're my choice. Not because circumstances put you here, but because of who you are. Because I choose you, Clara. Every day I'll choose you. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands, and kissed him, deeply, thoroughly, trying to pour all her love and gratitude and hope into that kiss. He responded in kind, his arms coming around her, holding her close. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elijah's eyes held a question. Clara answered it by taking his hand and leading him toward the bed, toward their future, toward the life they would build together one day at a time. Morning came bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the windows. Clara woke to find Elijah already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with a soft smile. Good morning, Mrs. Carter, he said. The name sent a thrill through her. Mrs. Carter, Clara Carter. She'd spent so many months thinking of herself as Clara Hawthorne, the abandoned bride, the woman with no place. Now she was someone new, someone who belonged. Good morning, Mr. Carter. She stretched, feeling pleasantly sore and deeply content. How long have you been awake? Not long. I was just... He paused, seeming almost embarrassed. Watching you sleep. Making sure you were real, that last night really happened. Clara's heart melted. It was real. I'm real. This is real. She kissed him softly. And you're stuck with me now. Good, he murmured against her lips. That's exactly where I want to be. A small voice from the hallway broke the moment. Mama? Papa? Are you awake? Can I come in? Clara's breath caught at that word. Mama. She'd heard it a few times yesterday, but hearing it now, in the morning light, in her new life, made it suddenly, powerfully real. Just a minute, sweetheart, Elijah called. He looked at Clara, his eyes dancing with amusement and joy. Our daughter is very patient, but not that patient. Our daughter, our life, our future. Clara threw on a robe and opened the door to find Lily bouncing on her toes in the hallway. I tried to wait, but it's been forever, and I wanted to make sure you were still here and didn't disappear in the night, and that yesterday really happened, and... Lily paused for breath. Did it? Did yesterday really happen? Are you really my mama now? Clara knelt down, taking Lily's small hands in hers. It really happened. I'm really your mama now. Forever and always. Lily threw her arms around Clara's neck, hugging fiercely. I'm so happy. I prayed every night that Papa would marry you, and that you'd stay, and that we'd be a real family, and God listened. Over Lily's head, Clara met Elijah's eyes, and the love she saw there was matched only by her own. They'd all been praying, in their own ways, for healing and hope and home. And somehow, impossibly, those prayers had been answered. The months that followed were full of work and joy in equal measure. Spring turned the Montana landscape green, and Clara planted her garden, learning which vegetables grew best in the harsh climate. Lily helped enthusiastically, if not always effectively, chattering constantly and asking endless questions that Clara answered with patient good humor. Elijah taught Clara to ride properly, and she began accompanying him around the ranch, learning the work that kept them fed and sheltered. It was hard labor, harder than anything she'd done in Philadelphia, but it was satisfying in a way factory work had never been. She could see the results of her efforts growing all around her. In May, a letter arrived that made Clara's heart stop. Philadelphia postmark. Mrs. Henderson's handwriting. Clara had given her old landlady the ranch address before leaving. With shaking hands, Clara opened it to find a brief note and a newspaper clipping. The note read, "Thought you'd want to see this. Sounds like you had a lucky escape. Best wishes in your new life. Mrs. Henderson." The clipping was from the Philadelphia Inquirer's Society page. It announced the engagement of Mr. Levi Ransom of Montana Territory to Miss Constance Whitmore of Philadelphia, daughter of railroad magnate Samuel Whitmore. The brief article noted that Mr. Ransom had recently inherited a substantial ranch and was looking to expand his operations with financial backing from his future father-in-law. Clara read it twice, then handed it wordlessly to Elijah. He scanned it quickly, then looked at her with concern. "How do you feel?" Clara thought about it honestly. A year ago, even 6 months ago, this news might have devastated her. Seeing Levi succeed, seeing him find exactly the advantageous match he'd wanted, might have felt like salt in wounds still raw. But now? Now she felt nothing but a distant pity for Constance Whitmore, who was about to marry a man who saw her as a business transaction rather than a partner. "I feel grateful," Clara said finally. "Grateful that he showed his true colors before I married him. Grateful that everything happened exactly the way it did." She took Elijah's hand. "If he'd married me that day, if everything had gone according to plan, I would have missed this. Missed you and Lily and this life we're building. So I'm grateful." Elijah pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "So am I. Every day, I'm grateful." As summer arrived in earnest, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Clara's garden flourished, providing vegetables for their table in excess to preserve for winter. Lily grew taller, her reading improving rapidly under Clara's patient instruction. And Elijah smiled more freely now, the shadows that had haunted his eyes fading with each passing day. On a warm July evening, after Lily was in bed, Clara and Elijah sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Clara's hand rested on her stomach, where she was almost certain a new life was beginning to grow, though it was too early to be sure. Too early to tell Elijah, though she suspected he'd already guessed from the way he looked at her sometimes. "What are you thinking about?" Elijah asked, his arm around her shoulders. "About that day on the train platform," Clara said. "How I thought my life was ending, how wrong I was. It wasn't ending, it was just beginning. I know that now." Clara turned to look at him, this man who'd become her whole world. "Sometimes I try to imagine what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day, if you'd driven past and left me sitting there." "Don't," Elijah's voice was firm. "Don't imagine that, because it didn't happen. I did stop. You did come home with me, and everything that's followed, it's all real, all ours." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. In the distance, an owl called, and somewhere in the barn, a horse whickered softly. The sounds of home. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me that day, for stopping, for choosing me." "Always," Elijah murmured back. "Always and forever, Clara. You're home now, and you're never going to be lost again." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here, the letters and the hope and the devastating betrayal, the cold and the fear, and the moment when she thought she had nothing left, and then the unexpected kindness, the growing love, the discovery that sometimes the life you need finds you when you stop chasing the life you planned. She'd come west in a wedding dress made for a man who didn't deserve her, looking for a tidy future that was never real. Instead, she'd found a family that chose her daily, a home built on truth rather than fantasy, and a love that grew stronger with every shared sunrise. The little girl who'd whispered, "Daddy, she looks like Mommy," had been right in a way neither of them could have known. Not because Clara resembled Sarah, but because she'd become what this family needed: a mother, a partner, a heart to make the house home again. And the widowed rancher who'd frozen at those words, who'd taken a chance on a stranger in a wedding dress, had given Clara more than shelter or safety. He'd given her belonging, purpose, a place to plant roots and watch them grow. This wasn't the story Clara had planned, but it was the one she'd been given, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. As Elijah's hand found hers in the twilight, as they sat together watching their land settle into peaceful darkness, Clara finally understood what home really meant. Not a place you found on a map or reached by following someone else's directions. but a place you built with your own hands, filled with people who saw you truly and chose you anyway, where every day was a choice to stay and grow and love. She'd come to Montana looking for a husband. She'd found so much more. She'd found home,